Welcome to People Talking Sitting Down.
It sucks because the idea that we're perpetuating underneath it is that we won't be accepted in our fullness of who we are if we don't do it. Because there's a safeness that brands need you to be, right, in order to be comfortable writing that check. There's a reason why, like, LeBron is going to get deals that Kyrie Irving will never get.
Yeah, that's something that's within me that I would be afraid to, like, show. And then just that was kind of my sign to say, like, I don't care.
Yeah, my argument, bro, is that we're all creative. I think artists are just typically the people who early on are more courageous enough to actually express themselves.
All right, well, let's rock.
Let's do it.
Will Toms, thank you for coming.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here, bro. Excited for this conversation.
Me too, and thank you for saying a prayer. That was really cool.
Yeah, man. I would do it. I would do it on my own. So it's like if I'm sharing space with folks, if folks are open, I'm gonna do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's funny. I was listening to one of the conversations that you had that are out there online. There's a bunch of content out there, but you were kind of talking about growing up, and did you mention that you were in kind of a religious family?
Yeah,
and
man.
Getting away from it, because I think that's what happened to me. I grew up Catholic.
Yeah.
And then you're like, all right, guys, stop telling me what to do. And then you kind of come back and find it on your own.
Yeah, which is like that whole prodigal son thing, right? I was raised with my grandmother, and she's a minister, so that kind of made me de facto like preacher's kid.
Yeah.
So I totally know the experience of like being in church multiple times a week, sometimes multiple services on Sunday. So yeah, and honestly, like in retrospect, I'm really grateful for my upbringing in the church. I think it really did mold a lot of the foundation for what became like my leadership capabilities, the charisma that I have, my prowess as a speaker. A lot of those came down to the opportunities I was given in church to lead and to speak and to, do all those things. So I'm really grateful. However, when you're like thrown in as a kid and it's kind of overwhelming, I think there's at least a natural inclination that I had to want to be like, all right, now that I'm in college, let me kind of just go off and do my own thing, right?
Yeah.
And just figure it all out. And then over time, I think, it makes its way back, or shall I say, you make your way back, all right? Or I'll just say I made my way back and then was able to really redefine my relationship with God for myself, which I think is what I needed. And, I'm really grateful for the upbringing I had, though, because I think life is just hard out here.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have some sort of faith to ground you.
Exactly. And we were talking about all the chaos in the world and everything going on. And that's something that I think is going to come back. It feels like it's a trend that's coming back.
I hope so.
I hate to even call it a trend, but just but religion, it's people are a little bit more open about it. And I had a friend, Blaze Connor, who owns a strip coffee company in here. And he started the coffee company, but really he just wanted to serve people. He has a very strong faith, and we talked it out, and we just talked about like it's almost as taboo as talking about money. Like it's like people don't want to, again, if you disagree with this religion or this sect or this and that, it's just like, I'm like, hey, just have something, have something. And it helps people because, again, kind of referencing the conversation we were having before we started recording, like everything going on in the world today. Yeah. There's chaos, and there's so many things that I'm excited to get like your thoughts on it, because you're very ingrained in everything that's happening socially through your work. So to start off, let's highlight what you do at Rec Philly. Sure. And I would love to hear a little bit about the background story. Yeah, happy to do it.
So I am someone who gets to proudly serve as the co-founder and the visionary of Rec. In Philly they call us Rec Philly. We think of Rec as this acronym, resources for every creator. So what Rec is essentially a membership club for artists, freelancers, content creators, anyone who is making art, making content. It's creative. We essentially are really in existence to empower people to do more of what they love to do. Right. And a lot of sometimes what gets in the way of an artist to create at a high level is access to high quality resources, right? Yeah. Actual physical tools, cameras, lights, studios, backdrops, co-working space, Live Nation venue, all of those cool things, right? But then on top of that, we do a ton of educational programming, teaching people what it actually looks like to build a business around their art and around their passion. Yeah. So bringing in industry experts to really just show folks what it looks like to do it right. And then the final thing is about the community. right? Connecting you with 1,000 other creatives who are like-minded on the same path. So we can kind of have this mastermind effect, grow together, learn together. But then also creating opportunity with each other.
Yeah.
Right?
And connections. And that's kind of like, I was joking. I caught up with Nicole the other night, and I was just like, I was so excited that we were sitting down to have this conversation, but also that I was like, just to be in the room. I just kept thanking her. I was like, just to put people in the same room.
That's right.
And be around that energy it's inspiring. And then again, you're picking things up through little conversations, through the podcast that she was recording.
And honestly, that's like what I think is the biggest value prop of Rec. It is the community. Like I always say, people come for the tools and all that stuff, but they stay for the community, because entrepreneurship is lonely, right? By itself, right? Being an artist is lonely, right? By itself. But when you're what I would call a creative entrepreneur, right? So you're like an entrepreneur, but you're also doing it through this lens of creating stuff that's really meaningful to me. Like I'm bearing parts of my soul. Doing that is extremely lonely, right? So our whole thing at Rec is, independent doesn't mean alone.
I like that.
So we really preach this idea of like collaboration, getting rid of that scarcity mindset and understanding that like, if you want to go far, like go together. Right. So there's that. So it's about really the intersection of just like-minded people that get to connect, that unfortunately maybe outside of that container would never have an opportunity to. But then we also run a full service creative agency. So we get to work with some of the biggest brands in the country. So when Cash App or Live Nation or Red Bull, when they need creative services, we get those contracts and we go right back into our membership, and then we hire members to help us do that work.
Nice.
So the idea is like, let's say you're a young photographer, like you might be skilled, but if you don't know the brands who need your work, you'll never have an opportunity to get that deal, right? So for us, it's like, again, it's like these brands are coming to be a part of our community, and we get to play a bit of matchmaker, right?
Yeah.
And, getting connected to the right resource or the right person or the right opportunity at the right time, I've seen can really be a life-changing experience.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's funny. I think just thinking about it, we were talking about sports gambling beforehand too. It's like, you're kind of like this middleman.
Yeah.
You're getting everybody, on both sides of the aisle that need each other.
Marketplace.
And yeah. That's awesome. Do you like, on Julian's podcast, you talked about, the comparison to like a gym membership for creatives. Mm-hmm. I love that. Is that something that was intentional, or did that just kind of like happen? Yeah.
So no, it was intentional, because I think like the model of Rec is just very new, right? There's no other businesses that have done what we're doing the way we do it. So it was really sometimes hard for folks to grasp. They're like, all right, like it's a membership, but like
it's what's happening here. You got studios everywhere.
So once we started to use the analogy of like, it's like a gym membership, but for creatives, people started to get it, right? Because they're like, okay, space and tools, right? I go to the gym because all the equipment I need is there, and I'll be around other people who want to get in shape, right? Yeah. And I understand the power of that. So that started to be really helpful. However, the one thing about the gym membership analogy that I don't love, and why we're starting to move more towards like the social club or the membership club, is because when you think about a gym membership, most people don't think about the real value of the community that can be built around it.
Yeah.
Because most gyms are not designed to be community building spaces.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, when they think gym, they just think equipment, right? And they think like that kind of stuff. But social clubs are about the people.
Yeah. And it's funny, I've been thinking about a gym. Like, I would say like everybody's got headphones in. You're in your little world. So it's as far as socially, it's very
exactly. Unless you go to like a CrossFit, right? Because CrossFit is like a gym, but it comes with this culture, right? You kind of know like the CrossFit culture is way different than the Planet Fitness culture, right?
What is that? That's something like CrossFit, something like, I'm trying to even think, this is such a silly example that came to my head, but like even things like knitting clubs, like there's certain things that just take hold and have this community around it, where it's
pickleball.
Like, yes. Yeah. Right? That's a perfect one. That's a perfect one.
It's so there's like, all right, as a community builder, I think about it like this, like there's activities, but then there's also like third spaces.
Okay.
Right. So, and what I mean by that is like there's places where activities happen, but then there's also places that actually like think of themselves as like a third space. And like for anyone who doesn't know that term, a third space is like in our lives, we typically all have like a place that we live, and we all have a place that we work. But it's like, where is that third space where I actually get to spend most of my social energy, and like I can be around other people that I care about. And back in the day, that was a lot for a lot of people. The churches were that, right? For some people, like the bowling alley was that, right? And it wasn't just about bowling. It's about like the community that happens around bowling. It's about, oh, I met the dad of my kid's friend and like now we can build community.
Yeah.
But slowly, and then, you know, COVID kind of exacerbated this. Third spaces started to go away because we're all just on the internet, right? So I think what, for example, like a CrossFit does that maybe like a Planet Fitness doesn't do is instead of just saying, hey, this is the place for the activity, I think CrossFit is a little bit more intentional about saying, and also people like us do things like this. There's a way of being, there's a lifestyle that's also associated around it. And that makes way for like identity.
Yeah.
And really what a lot of us are looking for in our third spaces and in our lives is that communal identity. Right.
Yeah.
So it's almost like if someone joins CrossFit, they're going to make sure you know they joined CrossFit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Vegans, they're going to let you know that they're vegan because there's an identity associated with the community that they're a part of.
It's funny. So I'm currently writing a paper on mental health and men's mental health specifically, and trying to understand what it is that, you know, men struggle with mostly.
Yep.
And a lot of it is that identity piece. And that's something where people like men feel like they need to feel like they have a purpose. And, and through a lot of that is through work and making money and providing 100%. And serving. Yeah. And then also in relationships. And that's another thing with like family life, like feeling. And there's different, I was talking to my brother-in-law, and they've got 2 young kids. And at this point in their lives, like they're attached to their mom because they, you know, at that point, and we
stage,
we were just kind of having a conversation about, as a father, he's kind of going through and learning a little bit like, all right, but maybe now's not my time to
give it a few years.
Yeah, but that's what we were talking about. I was like, well, you're going to be, you know, taking ice hockey practice and doing all those things, and like just having a different time. And that's something that I was also reading a study the other day that men really struggle with those kinds of changes. Yeah, like that's a big consciousness shift when you have a child. And you know, divorce, something like divorce. You know, a lot of men struggle more than women because women have. They already have this, whether it's a community or support systems, that men just don't have. Which, why do you think it's changed? Like, why do you think? Like, I was reading about those third places like a couple weeks ago, and it's like, you know, they used to be the pubs, they used to be the, you know, whether it was even men's groups or cigar clubs, like things like.
Well, first, I just want to like acknowledge, like, I deeply, deeply resonate with the point you made that like society is getting to a point where men are losing access to purpose, right? And that is drastically affecting men's mental health, right? And I just think it's so important. And you know, it's funny because there's some people who would hear you say that and then say, but maybe we just were doing it wrong, and like men shouldn't equate their value to their purpose or their usefulness or their work, right? But I just vastly disagree with that, right? And you know, admittedly, I'm proudly a Christian, right? So like a lot of times I do think about like my value set through that lens, right? And like when I think about Adam and Eve, right? What we don't talk about very often is like before God gave Adam Eve, he first gave Adam an assignment. He gave Adam work. It was like, yo, you're going to tend the garden, right? You're going to have dominion over this. Interesting. So it's like, to me, the way relationships are even supposed to work is men should first have purpose and they should have work before they find a partner. Because in my opinion, and not even in my opinion, but in the book, it's like your partner, your helpmate is supposed to be there to help you do your best job at doing your best work. Yeah. Right. So sometimes as men, we even try to do that out of order. We try to like fall in love first, right? Before we actually have our own house in order and we have our own work life figured out and all that stuff. And I think that causes chaos later. Yeah. Right.
It's funny. I think like, so what I'm trying to do in this paper is take things from the science field, from religion, from philosophy, everything. They all agree
100%
at the top. And that's the thing. It's like, even like what you mentioned about on the bookshelf, Sapiens. It's like, well,
phenomenal book.
We're hardwired to serve a purpose and to go out and collect food. And we're supposed to be running around and doing all that as men. Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, it's such a tricky thing. And I'm trying to, let down my own little shield of thinking about, again, what are other people going to think if I say the wrong thing on here or some different things like that. But like, that's what we're losing today, to be able to have these open conversations. Men and women are born differently, and they just are. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
but like
100%.
and there's different things that you naturally lean towards, and that's fine, and that's okay. And can we just like,
Yeah, and I think a part of what's happening in society right now, which is causing the challenges that you're highlighting of, men and purpose and all that kind of stuff, is I think we're trying to get away from the real truths that exist in the way that we've just developed, like sociologically, right? Like, and I think the more and more we get away from like these ideas that have been steeped in science and also religion and also philosophy, and we try to almost like create new ideals for how humans should act today, it disconnects us from our roots, you know? And then you have all these people who like are moving away from things like tradition and things like culture, right? That have a deep purpose in our lives. So now you have all these people who feel isolated because they're not connected to anything.
Yeah. And that's the thing is everybody's looking for that something. Everybody's looking for that
deeply
group.
craving connection.
Yeah.
You know?
And I try to hold opposing ideas in my head at the same time. That's like one of those like, people talk about that, but like it's like I can think that, just going back to like the men and women, like I can think that there's difference and also support your right to, hey, if you want to transition or do anything later in life, like support that. Like trying to do both and just having the conversation and understanding. And that's why I host a podcast in the way that I do, with long form in-person conversations, because you have to feel people's back and forth. Yeah. And as a creative, as a creative person yourself, and being surrounded by so many people creatively, like how long have you been doing Rec Philly?
Man, Rec was birthed in 2015.
2015. All right, so you're almost 10 years in.
Yeah, almost a decade. Yeah. I've been a full-time entrepreneur for a decade now.
Wow.
Since I was like I think 21 years old, man. So I started really early.
Well, I'm just going to switch the question immediately. So are you lonely in your process now? And if not, when was the lonely part of your entrepreneurial journey?
That's a good question. So I'd say this. I think what made me great at what I do, right, and what helped me find my purpose is like I grew up as that kid who deeply understood the value of community, right? So my family's from the city, right? My family's from Germantown. And then, after, a lot of just like tough family things, it was important for my grandmother, for me to go to school outside the city. Right. She's like, yo, this kid's brilliant. If I could just get him off this block, like he'll have all sorts of opportunity. She was right. So shout out to my grandmother for being brilliant. So I was that kid who like all my family was in the city. I went to church in the city, but I was going to high school with a lot of kids who didn't look like me, and I had a whole different socioeconomic status than me and all that. So I was that kid who was always like, I was too black for the white kids, but I was also kind of like the way I talked, I was way too proper for the homies that were still in the city, and like too artsy for the smart kids, but way too smart for the artsy kids. Like, so I've navigated my life as always understanding what it meant to be other. So I also knew what it meant to build community outside of what existed. So I think like those seeds of loneliness is like, oh, I'm the only black kid in my gifted class. Like, dang, this is kind of lonely for real, because y'all don't understand anything outside of these books that we're sharing, right? Like, so I quickly understood, one, how to build community, how to disarm people, how to make people feel safe, how to be that chameleon, right? And then
kind of hypersensitivity and hyper awareness.
Super, and then over time you learn, you get to unlearn things like code switching and all these other tools that you
code
develop.
Switching. What's that?
Code switching is the term for what some people do in environments where they know that people are different from them. For example, like a lot of people, especially black people, like they have like a professional phone voice. Yeah. So they kind of like, they'll pitch it up a little bit, right? Just to make people feel safe and things like that. It's just this idea that like I can kind of blend, I can mold my mannerisms to fit the environment. Yeah. Right. And I grew up doing that. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm talking to teachers in one way, and then if I'm talking to my homies from my neighborhood, I got a whole different dialect. Right.
As soon as you said that, it reminded me that I just saw this because Jalen Hurts gets accused of this. Sure. When he gets like he's mic'd up and then he's up at the podium and he sounds completely different.
He understands it.
Does that suck, or is that
it's
like
trash?
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It sucks, and here's why. It sucks because the idea that we're perpetuating underneath it is that we won't be accepted in our fullness of who we are if we don't do it. Yeah. Right. Jalen Hurts, and I'm not speaking for him, but my assumption is he knows that to get all the things that he deserves, he got to put that voice on a little bit to get that big Gatorade deal. right?
Yeah.
Because there's a safeness that brands need you to be, right, in order to be comfortable writing that check. There's a reason why, like, you know, LeBron is going to get deals that Kyrie Irving will never get.
Yeah. The example that came to me immediately was Ja Morant.
Yo,
it's like he's like
that's why Ja Morant was that whole thing was so sad, because it's like, bro, like you're gonna be a hundreds of $1 million guy.
Yeah. Billionaire if you want to be.
Easily, right? But because you're pandering to trying to look cool to these cats, like coming from places that you ain't even come from, now you're throwing part of your life away.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And the NBA don't care. They're gonna get you out of here. That's why Zion Williamson he's now has a limit, right?
Yeah.
Because of his behavior in certain ways. And that's just the reality of especially minorities who are upwardly mobile. We all know that, like, it's different. You don't get to be Obama without moving like Obama. You don't get to be Tiger Woods pre-issue without moving like Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
You don't, unfortunately, even like the reason why we still say that Kobe's not better than Jordan is because of what happened off the court, right? Like, and we just know that. Like, there's a legacy thing that's all wrapped up, and it's really about, to just be super candid, it's like sometimes people choose to do the code switching, and sometimes they don't, and like you just got to go in open eyes and know what comes with that with that choice.
It's funny, I try to think in my own personal life, and just with everything, it's like learning from negative things, learning from painful things, and trying to appreciate certain things. Because as you're saying that, it's like and I've told the story on here before, but like I grew up, my dad was a small business owner. So like when I from a very young age, I was taught to shake your hand, look you in the eye, have adult conversations. And I kind of had to grow up in certain ways before, for a multitude of other reasons too. But like I felt like almost like an adult. And it was always like, my dad was always so proud when people would say like, oh, your son's so mature. And like, that's great. But like, then I'm going and like bullying kids in 7th grade. Like I wasn't that guy, you know, and I was constantly back and forth. And I try to look at it, well, was it a good thing or was it a bad thing? I'm just going to try to see the good in it, because there has to be some sort of good in that. For sure. As a business owner, again, like you were talking about, you know, fundraising, going into different things. Like I imagine that it's kind of like a chameleon. It's like that's how I try to describe myself, because like that's why I like to have. I talk the same way that I talk to you, that I talk to a guy in a suit, and I talk to somebody who's homeless. And I want to talk.
And that's the goal. The goal is to be you in every room you walk in, right? And I think, unfortunately, sometimes people feel a pressure that they have to earn the right to be them in every room they walk in.
That's how I feel.
And that's a worthiness thing, right? Like, to be honest, like I even experienced when I was a kid, or even like, let's just say 5-6 years ago, when I first started fundraising for rec and things like that, bro, like, you know, there's just such a pressure to like try to placate to making people like you. Because the difference between this person liking me and not liking me could be $1 million. So I better like put it on real quick to make sure that we can get this deal done, right? But, you know, that led me, for example, in a college before rec and fundraising, like I was a super involved kid, right? And I've always been that way throughout my whole schooling. But I was that kid who was like very involved with my fraternity. I was very involved in the TV studio. I was producing TV shows and all that kind of stuff. But then like I also had a wild social life, right? And like I also was, you know, whatever. But the thing was, depending on what sector of my life you knew me from, you probably didn't know the other parts of me, right? And it was almost like this like siloing, right? Of like, oh yeah, I know Will in the social life, but I don't know that he's a Dean's List student, right? But then I think over time I got to unlearn that stuff, and it's like, yo, nah, the actual goal, freedom, is being able to just be me, unmoved, all times, right? And then over time in business, it felt like I had to like earn that privilege to be like, yo, I'm about to go to a fundraising meeting, but like I'm still wearing my sneakers. That's who I am, right?
It's funny, and I want to pick your brains. You know, we usually set up these conversations to get into people's, you know, stories. I say like past, present, future. Sure. And you've got an entire story that I am excited to get into, but I want to like ask about the creative people, because again, you being around so many creative people,
for sure,
it feels like creatives from what I think I mentioned to you, I was like, I never would have considered myself a creative person ever. I didn't like art. I thought it was the dumbest thing. Books, anything. So I thought it was so stupid. Now I'm like realizing, holy shit, like I have this.
Shout out growth.
This is, like, this is a creative journey. Like again, like, you know, I'm trying to have different conversations, because I look at this as I look at this as a book of my life that I get to sit down and have awesome conversations. But what I've learned through creative people or being around creative people, a lot of it comes from places of pain. A lot of it comes from places of internal conflict
in the beginning,
and trying to, interesting. Because I am in the beginning. So like that's how I'm feeling. It's like all of these things that disagree.
Yep.
Like when you were talking about different, you know, the way that you present yourself. Like I used to, and I'll probably start doing it again, but like I would paint my nails.
Really?
Throw people off because
that's interesting.
Just like I judged a guy who had painted nails because I like, just go, oh, is he gay? And then I was like, wait, like why did I just come to that in my head? Do I wish, because my thing was, I said to my friend, I was like, I wish I had the balls to do that. And she's like, you do. Yeah. So do it. And I was like, and then she just did it right there. And I was like, I did it for 6 months or so. But it's like, that's something where it's just like, that's something that's within me that I would be afraid to like show usually. Yeah. And then just, that was kind of my sign to say like, I don't care.
That's dope. Yeah. My argument, bro, is that we're all creative. You know, I think as humans, like we're fortunately one of the only species on the planet that God kind of made in that image to be able to create things. Like even as we sit here and we're looking at this amazing view, bro, like literally like every single light that we see out there, right, is indicative of a person and their own little individual life with their own little fears and desires and concerns that are just moving about the earth. But because of a person, we literally see all of those windows and all of those lights because someone was like, yo, let's build this thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's just like, as creatives, like, bro, the fact that we can sit here in front of microphones and now millions of people can potentially listen is because someone was like, let's build that.
It's an idea.
So we're all creatives. I think artists are just typically the people who early on are more courageous enough to actually express themselves.
Yeah. Right? I'm reading in the middle of Rick Rubin's the Creative Act book.
That's dope.
And he talks about how like there's this internal war, and I think Stephen Pressfield's War of Art says the same thing, where it's like, it's again kind of like a Bible. Like it's like literally I was reading it and I was like, oh my God, this is happening to me. What's going on? But that urge to express yourself overtakes that fear.
That's it.
Because that, I mean, again, I can only speak for myself. Like I have this massive fear. I was just telling you about social media. Like I'm scared to death, but this is happening whether I like it or not.
And it's a part of it, man. I think what it means to be creative is to like be willing to do this dance of like, there's this spectrum of like super crippling self-doubt or like Kanye level ego, you know, and like just be willing to kind of go back and forth. Yeah. Cause it's always that way. It's always, you know, hey, I have this idea and I want to express it, but like, how are my friends going to think about this? Or like, how am I going to look to these people or that people? But, you know, creators are just the people who are willing to say, so what? Yeah. You know?
And when you're thinking like that, you're living in somebody else's head.
Yeah.
And you're fearing 100%. Like a hypothetical.
And the reality is like, for real, to go back to like the mental health piece, like the reality is expression is like who humans are. Right? Like before a kid can walk, he's probably learning how to dance, right? Before he talks, he can sing, right? Like there's all these little things just about that. And I think that the further we get away from our genuine creative expression, the more room we make for depression, right? What's not expressed becomes depressed. Yeah. Right?
Interesting.
And I think that's why a lot of people get into those places where like, they're not creating and expressing themselves well. They're not doing the things they know they should be doing. And that's what brings in depression. Yeah. Like I know that for myself, like when I'm not writing and journaling often, when I'm not speaking up in conversations that matter, like before I know it, I'm not even you know? Wow. And it's crazy. Really because I've weighted my mind and my spirit down with all these things that were meant to come out.
Yeah. So what's your go-to? What's your form of expressing yourself to be able to deal with those things? And those
journaling is number one these days. Yeah. Like my journal and it comes almost everywhere with me. My journal sees it all. There's business notes in there. There's just life notes in there, relationship notes. There's just cool words, right? Like all of the things that just like come through usually are in the journal or in the notes app in my iPhone. And then when I have time, there's other more elaborate ways I love to express, whether it's, you know, directing music videos and things like that, or creating content, speaking. You know, I'm an author now, so like I got to get my thing off. And
there we go.
In written form, long form.
I missed that. So, I missed the author part.
Oh yeah. Published author. I wrote my first book last year.
No way. What was it on?
Yeah, so it's called Uncommon Sense.
Okay.
Your Strategy Guide to Creative Freedom. So it's literally a 10-chapter book, and it's a strategy guide for anyone who's trying to build a profitable business around their passion this is like the blueprint to doing it.
No way. All right. Well, sick. We got to link that.
Yeah. I'll send you a copy, man. That's going to be really helpful for you.
Yeah. It's so funny. A lot of these things, they feel like they're, it's almost like I'm getting an education from every single person that I get to sit down and talk to, and your wealth of knowledge and the fact that I get to access that is incredible. So
sure.
So thank you for that.
But yeah, man, that whole creative piece though, that creative expression and the lack thereof leading to depression, I think is just something really important.
Yeah.
For people to sit with.
I was gonna say, I figure, again, working in the creative space, there's a total assumption, but that there would be a higher rate of either emotional issues, 100%. Mental illness, mental health, because I think mental 100%. Health and mental illness, very different things. But as far as because you were so excited when we sat down and I mentioned what I did, and I was like, I could see it in your face. And there's this thing with people that you see it, you can just see you've got a story. Yeah. So I want to get into it, and I want to get into again how you grew up, the way that your mind started working at a young age. Because from the research that I've done, it's just like you're a thinker. Is the way that I would describe you. Like you're constantly thinking, and
that's why I got it right.
And another little tidbit: when we sat next to each other at dinner, as the podcast conversation was going on, being recorded in front of us, you were clearly processing everything, and you would even vocalize that as well. And it was just so like I was soaking it in. I was like,
that's dope that you noticed that. That's cool, man. Yeah, that's how my brain works.
Yeah, but when I like to ask the question of like kind of like when. Not when did you wake up, but when did you start thinking about these things as a kid? Because it seemed like a very early on thing in your life.
Early, bro. Early. So for context, my upbringing was really interesting because I was raised with my grandmother. Okay. Right. And the reason I was raised with my grandmother from such a young age is because one of the like kind of defining moments in my family was I had an uncle who was murdered when he was 16.
No way.
Yeah, just right at the corner of our block up in Germantown. And behind that and some other things, my father now, this May will be 26 years that he's been incarcerated. So I've navigated that for most of pretty much all my life.
And I think you mentioned before that it was like a 30 to 60 it was called?
Yeah, my dad's doing a 30 to 60.
What is that? Is that just 30 to 60 years?
Yeah, 30 to 60 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
And when did that happen in your life? How old were you?
I was young. So, I mean, he's been there 26 years and I'm 32. So like I was like 5 or 6.
So did you process that at that age, or did you like, what is that? Like, I'm fascinated by, again, these are the things that's like, you walk by somebody in the street, you got no idea where they're from, what they've gone through. Yeah. And this is something where it's like,
I mean, my early years, like coming up, bro, was like, this is happening when I'm in elementary school, right? Yeah. So like I'm the funeral, and then, my dad getting arrested and like being there for that, watching, him get taken away and all that stuff. And then, I vividly remember many trips of like me and my grandmother driving across state to visit him, in prison, him. And also I had another uncle who, was serving life, who unfortunately passed away, in there recently. So like, I know what it looks like, right, to navigate, having an incarcerated parent or incarcerated family members, a lot of stuff with my mother as well. And I think I found creativity because I really needed to be able to process those things. And in the beginning, poetry was like my outlet for just understanding myself. So I was in elementary school writing poetry books, and it really, most of it was around all of the things in my family that I didn't quite understand that I was trying to.
Was that something you did in private?
Yeah. So it's funny because I did it in private, but then when I got to 4th and 5th grade, and then again, more notably in 7th grade, I had teachers who really pushed my writing ability and noticed it. So I remember, for example, in 7th grade, like there was an assignment for the whole class where like, so I was in gifted classes, and I don't know if like your school district had that.
I forget what they called it.
Okay. Yeah. So it was like, kids, they're like, oh, you're a really good learner. You're really smart. Yeah. So like they kind of set us aside. So like instead of taking traditional English classes, I would take like these advanced level classes or whatever. But anyway, in that one class, she, shout out Mrs. Hurley, she challenged us all to write a poem book. And, some students took it seriously, some didn't. But for me, I took it super seriously because I was like, I'm already writing. So like, this is great. Now I have a whole purpose and reason to do this more. But I'll never forget, man, there was a moment when at the end of that course, we were all supposed to share our writing with the classmates. And I was like, no, I was like, I will give this to you, teacher. You can read it, but like, this ain't for everyone else. And that was because like all of the things I was writing were so personal to me.
Yeah.
And again, going back to our convo about code switching and all this, like as a 7th grader who now is starting to like go to school outside the city instead of the inner city, my classmates didn't know anything about the things I was writing about.
Interesting.
They knew Will as just like this young, bubbly, charismatic kid, right? Who was smart and charming, but they didn't know like that I was going, you know, upstate on the weekends to visit my dad. Like they didn't know about all those inner workings.
So were you hiding it? Like were you, like I always call it the mask.
I was, bro. I was, because it was like, you know, back then as a kid, you kind of think of like your story as like a liability, right? It's like, you know, it's like, I don't want to be found out.
That's
right? Because, you know, it's twofold, right? It's like, one, I'm not here. I don't need nobody's pity. I don't want people to like look at me as the woe is me kid, you know, like, yo, you can treat me just like everybody else. I'm out here, you know, doing my thing. But then also it's just like, I didn't trust the kids around me to even be capable of holding my story, because I knew that most of them were not navigating the similar life experiences. So like to trust another, I don't know, 12-year-old kid to understand what it means to like not have both parents at home, not be able to like call your dad, right? Like it was like, yo, you don't get it, so I'm gonna save us both the discomfort and I'm gonna just hold it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, creativity, bro, is what allowed me to just pour in and start to really like express in a container where I wasn't comfortable expressing openly with the kids around me.
Yeah.
You know?
That's how was your relationship with your father at that time and growing up? Like in the, you know, were you able to talk to him? Were you able to get to know him? Were you able to, because when I look at you again, you're a creation of two people, and
facts.
you know, those people again in different ways were taken away from you in certain areas of life.
Straight
and
up.
for you to be, and that's why you come across as such a, and for those that are listening, like Will and I just met and barely know each other, but like I, you know, I got this read immediately that you're so strong into the ground in who you are, your identity, and and it seems, and the more that I learned about you,
it's a lot of hard work right there.
Yeah. And it comes across like it wasn't. And
that's dope.
And that's the thing, is that I think that's what happens, you know what I mean? But to like, I'm just thinking about like how you became you know, like what influences, if you didn't have that, you know, access to your parents in certain ways, what were you looking up to? Certain guys? Were you looking up to people in media, people in sports, different things like that?
Yeah, straight up, man. So when I was coming up early on, and you know, the first few years of my dad being incarcerated, like, you know, I would see him all the time, and like, not all the time, I would see him, and like, you know, me and my dad bonded over playing chess, right? He taught me how to play chess when I was a kid, and like, you know, I do that. I still play. But I think I was too angry and disappointed with him to actually want to get to know him as him. You know what I'm saying? Like there's just all that like, you know, unprocessed resentment of just like, yo, bro, like why are you here and not like back at the crib where I actually need you to be, right? And you know, you don't understand the nuance of all of these different life circumstances and how they connect. Right?
And how his story got him there.
Straight up, bro. Because a part of his story is like, yo, my dad had me when he was like 16. You know what I'm saying? He was a kid.
Yeah.
So like and I didn't have the grace to understand that like my dad was a child, having a child.
Yeah.
Right?
You don't think about, you don't have anything to compare it to.
No way. So those are things that didn't come into play until much later, right, in our relationship. So yeah, not having, again, not only was it my dad, right? My dad is the oldest of all his brothers. But then there's like his younger brother, who then also was arrested around the same time as he did. So I didn't have my uncle, and then my other uncle who was murdered. So it was like, yo, all of the male role models that I had, one by one, were kind of like taken by the streets, right? So the role models that I had, you know, I don't say this disrespectfully, but it's like they all became almost like my anti-role models. I was like, yo, I know what that path looks like, so I'm over here with it, right? And like, I was never one of those kids that tried to like glorify the street life, because it was like, my life is actually so in it that like y'all don't even understand how whack it is, but I do.
So did you not even have a time in your life where you wanted to live that kind of life? Were you immediately like,
as crazy as it sounds, bro, is like the blessing of how I grew up was that my dad got booked when he did. Because, and he and I had his conversation lately where he was just like, yo, bro, like, he's like, yo, man, I'm just really proud of you, like, and everything you're accomplishing. And he's like, if I had to live this whole thing out over again, making every decision the same for you to be who you are and where you are, he's like, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Wow.
And he's like, because I understand, bro, that like if I was still out on the street when you were 12 and 13 and 14 and 15 doing exactly what he was already doing, of course I probably would have been running to chase him and do what he's doing.
Yeah.
I would still be this smart kid that I am now. I would just apply it to that.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's how it go. And like, that's why I have such a heart for like the youth of Philly, because I know that there's so many geniuses in our neighborhoods that like, they just don't have the positive role model to actually learn how to apply that stuff.
Yeah, they're just applying it to the wrong thing. And
exactly.
I don't even want to say they're applying.
They're applying it to what they know.
Yeah, yeah.
So if they don't know something better, then it is what it is.
Have you ever seen? It was a TED talk that was it's like the difference between drug dealers and CEOs is not that much.
It's not that much.
Like there's this again. If you know how to
not that much
apply all of those things.
There's so many skills that like, honestly, if you become, there's no such thing as a successful drug dealer, but if you ever become what someone would consider a successful drug dealer, the level of relationship building required, the level of empathy you have to deploy in certain situations, the level of supply and demand that you have to deploy in uncertainty.
You're a salesman.
The level of sales skills, the level of stress management, like it's CEOship to the 10th degree.
Yeah.
Because in CEO world, it's like no one could just punch you in the face without any repercussions, right? So it's like there are no checks and balances, right? Like it's really, really, it's worse than startup life.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I just say that if we can just filter that energy, that genius into something more productive, bro, like there's so much to be gained.
And that's the thing is I think you got to make it cool to do what you're doing.
You have to.
And that's when I wrote my original business plan for this, I said I want to talk about mental health, but I want to make it cool.
You have to.
I want to make it interesting, and I want to make it fun. Yeah. And it needs to be light.
Yeah.
Because there's dark stuff that we've talked about in here.
Yeah.
It sucks and it's awful. But I try to sandwich it within,
again,
what you're doing, who you are, all of these different things. Because I think my part of it is like there's a mental health story within everybody.
Absolutely.
Everybody's dealing with something, and if you're not, you're going to.
That's facts.
And I feel fortunate that I've dealt with things earlier in life that I, again, have a little bit more of resilience built up.
Yep.
And I think that that's something that, again, back to creative people, it's just like, it's not a bad thing. And the way that you said that and the way that you said that your dad said he wouldn't do anything differently is fascinating. And I kind of agree with those things. I try to have those hurdles. I went to this,
you need them.
Yeah.
You need them.
And it's like, if you didn't have those, you wouldn't be you.
I would not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing, bro. There's so much there to unpack, man. It's like I think sometimes everyone wants all of the glory of the lifestyle and the outcomes of great things, but like they don't want the pain that built the desire for the nice things and the outcomes, right? Like it's like you want to thank God for the blessings, but you don't want to thank him for the lessons, right? The challenges that created the lessons for you to then be able to go on and do your thing, right? So for me, it's like I've gotten to a place of peace in my own healing that like I'm grateful for it all.
Yeah.
You know, because I know that like you don't get the beauty without the struggle part. And like
What was the part as far as healing goes? Like what was the hardest part at that, whether it be at that young age, whether it be later in life, and just the realization? Because there's I don't want to use the word, I mean, it's like almost like a finality to your dad's story in that way. That's a long time when you're that young, thinking about like, all right, 30 years, like, well, I'm 7, that's how many lifetimes, like, like what was the I guess like really just like the most painful part?
That's a good question. I'll put it this way. I don't know if it's the most painful part, but I think the tough part of being in a scenario how I was raised is I think a lot of my life I've lived this truth of like wanting to become something that I've never seen before. Right? It's like it's really difficult to be something you can't see. Right. So like even for myself, right, like I'm 32 now, and like I genuinely believe, and it's funny, I crack up with some of my homies about this who have similar upbringings. We always felt like single parents raising ourselves.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Because like I didn't have like a certain father figure actually in real proximity to me that like could be a mentor until I was like 25.
Yeah. So I just asked that question and there wasn't any. You were like, there's
bro.
nobody.
My role models were on TV. Like
Yeah.
I was up watching music videos and looking up to people like Russell Simmons and Master P and Jay-Z, right? Because those, again, going back to what you said about making things cool, those are the guys that I saw that looked like me, that were getting money, that were doing it on their own terms, and it was fly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, I was like, okay, cool. So I see the street life and it goes that way, but I see these guys on TV and they're doing it like this. I want to be over there, right?
Yeah.
So I had no problem like throwing myself in the books just because like, you know, my grandmother always preached that education was that key out.
Yeah.
But going back to your question, it's like the hard part was not knowing when it's going to end, right? Like the hard part is like, yo, I'm literally like out here trying to like use the machete to like slice my own path through this forest, because everything I've done in my life, I'm doing it for the first time in my family. You know, I was the first man in my family to go to college, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah, bro. I was the first person in my family to start, that I know of, to start an official business.
Especially because it's just obviously your brains weren't made up out of thin air. They came from somewhere.
No, and I know that like my dad is brilliant. Like I know that I get my charisma and my brains from him. My mother is also brilliant, but my dad, like he's him. Like when I talk to him today, I'm like, it's so crazy because like the relationship we have today is just really beautiful.
Yeah.
Because finally we're at a point where I've started to understand him, not as my dad, but just as a man, right?
Yeah.
And then I can start to be like, oh, okay, so that's where I get that from.
And there's that transition for guys, and I'm 28 years old, so I've kind of gone through it, or am going through it, where it's like you realize again you grow up and like it's like superhero. You think that this is like the untouchable person.
Yeah.
Both your parents, and then you just realize like,
so that's the hard part, right? Going back to your question, it's like my superheroes were taken away early. Like my superheroes weren't even superheroes. Like honestly, there was a long time in my life where like my superheroes, I was like ashamed of them. So it's like that does something to you as a kid to like grow up and not feel like there's that guy with the cape who always got my back, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I'm out here fending for myself, right? Trying to figure out how to avoid the scarcity mindset that comes with that. You know what I'm saying? I try to avoid the low self-worth that can come with that. You know what I'm saying? So like that was the hard part. But then it extends even to like now where it's like, I'm dating, you know what I mean? I'm about to, you know, be in a more serious relationship and want to get married at some point. But these are, again, experiences that I'm going to have to a certain extent, figure out on my own, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, I wasn't watching my parents married and for 20 years.
You don't have the example of the
Exactly.
lessons. And it's funny, I think about it like an invisible force field. I even feel this today. Like my parents, I wouldn't be able to do any of this without my parents, the love and support. And like it still does feel like I have this invisible force field that like, hey, if the world went to shit and everything was on fire, I'd still have something.
Like, they got me.
Yeah, I'd still have something. And that's a backstop that I feel grateful for. And and again, I don't want to hide it because it's true. And it's also, I didn't ask for it. It's not my, it's like, but I'm grateful for it. You know, or at least I have to be grateful for it. I should be grateful for it because through a lot of these conversations, it's been eye-opening to me. I've always had conversations like this, but then when you really get into the people's ins and outs, it's like, geez, dude, everyone's dealing with something. And
especially the high achievers.
Yeah. Why is that? Why? Tell me more about that.
Because bro, I look at it like this. Here's the way I think about it in my head. When you look at someone who's sprinting, like full force, like just booking it, you're like, dang, yo, you're like Usain Bolt, right? The irony is when you just see someone running full force, you don't know if they're running from something or running towards something. You don't know. You just know they're sprinting, right? And I think the thing about high achievers is, my hunch, and I can't say this is a blanket statement, but I think most high achievers get that way because there's something that they want to prove. There's something they want to overcome. There's something they want to do. There's some deep discomfort. I won't even call it pain, but there's a discomfort that they want to change for either themselves or for the next generation or for the world.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's like most of us want to change the world, and like eventually, if we're smart enough, we'll realize that like that first comes by just like changing yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's easier sometimes in the mind of a high achiever to change the whole world.
Yeah, that's so funny. How about for you? Are you running to something? Are you running for or running from something?
In the beginning, transparently, in the beginning, I was running from. a lot, right? But now I feel like I've kind of been able to do that inner work, and I've been able to reframe, the drive, and now I'm just running towards stuff.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, bro, I was running away from the reality that all my family knew. I was running away from prison. I was running away from potential for drug addiction. I was running away from poverty. I was running away from all of that.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurship was my mechanism. But now it's like I've been able to come to a peace with a lot of those things. And now I'm running towards being a great role model, being, an incredible father one day, being an incredible partner one day, and running towards just like, being free, just being like a strong example of what a positive man of faith can look like, and do it, and also still be fly.
I love that. Mix it in. Do you think that I like to talk about the word addiction because it's, again, I mean, depression is an addiction.
Sure.
Like brain pathways, all of this stuff. Religion can be an addiction. Running, lifting. There's good addictions. There's bad addictions. Do you think that you use that? Again, if addiction's in your blood, you got that gene and you're using it. Do you think that you're addicted to what you do? Do you think that at different points that you've used it as that outlet to say?
Yeah, I'd be capping if I didn't say yeah. Definitely workaholic energy was present, especially in my mid-20s. Like, I believed in that whole never not working, no days off, like all that kind of like, I don't know, hustle porn, right? That they say on Instagram and Twitter.
Eric Thomas, baby.
I love ET. Shout out ET.
That got me to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning.
See, but here's the thing about this, and I want to have this convo, because like when I think Eric Thomas, right, immediately the first thing I think of is you got to want it, as much as you want to breathe, right? Are we addicted to air?
Yeah. Right? Something said.
And this is a topic that at the dinner we were at had came up where, folks were just talking about like really, and I'll just paraphrase the idea of like, how bad do you want something, right? And like, I think we are, because the mental health conversation is so relevant right now, which it should be. I think there's also this challenge of like, we be trying to build padded rooms for people too, though, which I don't think is always a positive thing, right? So I say all this to say, I want to have the conversation about being a workaholic and all that kind of stuff. But there also is just a reality of like, if I wanted to achieve my goals, which when I was younger, I was like, oh, I want to be a millionaire by 25 or, all that kind of stuff. I want to be a millionaire by 30 and I want to do it the way I want. I want to do it around people I care about. And I want to do it, through all these creative things that I care about. You don't get to do that and also live a very regular work life.
Balance.
It just don't happen. Like, you don't become Kobe, but not be willing to work out 3 times a day.
Yeah.
You don't become Beyonce without doing the 3 a day. So like, I think it's really harmful to like preach to kids, like, you can do whatever you want in your life and eat candy every day. Like, it just doesn't happen that way. So like, yes, there was a workaholic energy, but also I think there was to everything a season. So it's like, it does take that sacrifice to do great things. So like, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am Forbes 30 under 30 and I have built a, multi-million-dollar business and partnered with some of the biggest entrepreneurs on the planet and, put millions of dollars back into the hands of my community if I wasn't willing to work for that season of my life.
To make that sacrifice.
So it's just like, you gotta want both. You can't just want the outcomes without the inputs.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think I mentioned this one of the previous conversations, but like I go back and forth with this concept of balance because when
balance is cap.
Yeah, like when I started this process, I was in my full morning routine. I was really healthy. I was really happy. Everything was good. And then I started doing this, and I like have said like it's been one of the toughest things for my mental health has been doing this.
Yeah,
which is I try to be open and honest about because hosting a mental health podcast, but like it's hard and it's supposed to be hard. And I'm supposed to feel these struggles right now.
Yes.
I'm in the early innings of what is like my life's work.
Yes.
What I want to do. I want to sit down with people for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
In different ways and at different times. But for right now, this is what it takes. It takes not spending any money socially.
Yep.
It takes doing what I've had to do.
Yep.
It takes, I've been unemployed. I just got a job. I'll start working. And
hey,
now
congrats.
Thank you. I would have figured out and balance all the, juggle things, but there is no balance.
No.
I needed to be like this right now. And it's been really tough. It's been tough for me. I've had a support system around me. It's been extremely helpful, but at the same time, it has to be this way.
Yeah.
If I want to get to the top.
Yeah. And eventually you want to have everything. But the reality and just the truth is like, you can have everything, just not all at once.
Yeah. Yeah. Not right
Up.
now.
You know what I'm saying? So like the idea of like me being 25 and being like a very successful entrepreneur and the best boyfriend ever and the best son and cousin ever and the best friend, like it's just cap. Like it just doesn't work. And I think there's just a reality that maybe we should have a more honest conversation around what it looks like to be focused, because balance and focus are opposites, right? Like if you think about it through the lens of a camera, right? If something is very much so in focus, you only know by also seeing that something else is way out of focus.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, unless you're going to go crazy with the f-stop and open it all the way up, it's like, you know, or close it all the way down, like you're not, everything is ever going to be in focus.
That's so funny.
So it's like, yo, the reason Kobe is great is because he focused on basketball.
Yeah. I'm laughing just because I love the way that technology reflects humans and how those kinds of things happen. And I've had this conversation about AI lately. It's like, I think that we really fear AI because I think that if you look at us,
we fear AI because we fear ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, are we, you know, if you boil it down, I always say like, if you run this out for the next however many years, don't we just end up back here? And we keep redoing it. We keep reincarnating. We keep, and again, I think that has everybody, technology, religion, all this stuff, everyone's onto the right thing. Have you ever heard of the egg theory?
No, what's that?
So it's just kind of how like this, it's just a short story that's, you know, fictional, but it's just about how maybe this life it's one big consciousness that we all live through different little shards and different little fractions. And I get to go live your life. I get to go live the homeless person's life. I get to go live Kobe's life. I get to go live LeBron's, all these Oprah, different people. And that's how you work on your soul and you learn things to get to this next level of whatever
So you're saying reincarnation is real and we're just trading lives and destinies?
That we're just one great bigger consciousness.
Oh, sure.
That we're all like, we are all one thing. And we're just seeing it like, again, like if you can't perceive everything, that's why we have this brain, this computer that is telling you don't need to see. It's again like when we're talking about psychedelics and stuff, when you see all that kind of stuff, like that stuff's there's dust floating all around this room, but our eyes have learned to cut out the stuff that isn't important so that we can operate. Because if you did feel everything all at once, that's what like schizophrenia is. Like that's like you can't operate.
So it's almost like the idea is like God is within all of us, and the whole purpose is for us to live out our lives to the point where we realize that God is in all of us and that we all should treat each other like we're fucking one.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. And it's like everybody, like, I really think like I'm struggling to figure out, because I don't feel smart enough to be able to like speak about these at a high enough level, the level that I would like to, but all of these things end up agreeing in like a core way. Yeah. A core way. And
because the ancient wisdom, man, has been around for a long time. And I think the lie that we tell ourselves is that we're vastly different humans than we were 1,000 years ago. And it's like, it's just BS, man. It's almost like, and I don't want to go too deeply into this, but it's like the lie that people tell us is that things are too complicated for us to understand. Yeah. When they don't want us to just investigate more. Yeah. Things are way simpler than we like to believe.
And that's
because and the reason they tell you that is because once you think that something's too complicated for you, you don't have to have the guilt of not doing anything about the things that you don't agree with that are happening.
Interesting.
That's why they do that. And it's
funny. I think about it like if that theory is true, or that's the way like I try to like live my life. Again, you know, why not be nice? Yeah. It's just like net, you know, like at the end of the day, it ends up working out. But I don't know. I get so wrapped up in my head, and I'll stay up all night about it. But it's like,
but there's something special in that theory though. But I think it's all just like people got to understand what their relationship is to God. Yeah. If we're going to talk about the mental health thing, man. Like, I think at the core of it, it starts with being disconnected from other people that love you. And the part under that is like being disconnected from yourself. And that starts by being disconnected from God and just understanding who you are in God's eyes.
It's funny, like with mental health, I think it seems from a society standpoint intentional to break people down, to cause these problems, to addict people through like terrible food.
Now we're talking.
Terrible content. Again, it's just like a computer, shit in, shit out. Yeah. And that's what
And they know that. We've been thinking about people's brains for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So we know what's good for us and we know what's not. Right.
Yeah.
And like, you know, not saying I believe this, but I know a lot of people who believe that like World War III is already going and PSYOPs is a thing and TikTok is a weapon.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that just came out the other day about like the Bin Laden letter that went viral.
I'm not sure what that is.
So like Biden wrote a letter, or not Biden, Bin Laden wrote a letter of, I forget when it was, like 2006 or something like that, about like all these terrible things with America, and it went viral on TikTok recently. Wow. And people being like, "Oh, he's got a point." And it's like, what the fuck? Like, this is where we're at in life, like where we're, you know.
See, this is the part of the conversation that goes back to Jalen Hurts, right? It's like Jalen Hurts, he be knowing what he want to say and how he want to say it, but then when he gets on that stage, he knows what he should say and what he shouldn't say to make sure that his check comes in. Yeah. There's a lot that I could say about this, but it's just like, you know, there's even a conscious decision of just like, how much do I really want to get into it based off that, like, I need the government to like me.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? That's the way. And then again,
but it's like, real.
Yeah. And it is what it is. And if we're playing this game, and like, that's, if you want to call life a game, you're playing by the rules. Yeah. And there are certain rules and there's certain things you can't say, because as we were talking about privacy and freedom, it's like, does it exist as much as we think? Like, there's not. And it's back to parents. Like, when you're growing up in different things, like, you don't act a certain way because a parent might, you're supposed to act a certain way, or different things like that. And then you get to grow into this young man and like start finding things out. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your life in those early 20s, when you were just kind of on the cusp of this entrepreneurial journey.
Grinding.
What happened? What was the switch? What was that aha moment that kicked you into like, all right, I'm going to do it?
Yeah. So my story is a little unique in the sense that, like, bro, I was on it early. Like, I was in high school, writing business plans. You know, I knew early that I was going to be an entrepreneur, that I never thought that I would be like the idea of working for a company for like 40 years and then like retiring, like, never ever crossed my mind. But again, like, I didn't really know many happy people in my life that was their story. Yeah. So I never defaulted that I needed to do that. You know what I mean? I actually had people in my life that were like, yo, you might not even finish college. You might just like go out and build a thing, right? And I used to be like, nah, relax. I want to graduate, right? But that's what I ended up doing, right?
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, man. And so for me, I was that kid in high school writing business plans. And then even when I went away to college, me and my co-founder, Dave, we've been best friends since high school. He was at Temple. I was over at IUP. We're like on Uvu, sending each other business plans back and forth, before Skype was the joint, right? So like I was it early. So then it wasn't really that weird for me when like I quit my great job to then start a business. Yeah. And so long story short, I did like internships and stuff. Studied communications, media, and a minor in economics, just because I wanted to understand how money worked. And then I got internships at places like NBC and all that stuff, which was fire, right? As a kid, learning news, and they gave me a lot of responsibility to shoot. But then I was like, yo, I hate everything about news. I hate the things we're talking about. I hate the culture of the newsroom. I hate the pace of it. And then they actually gave me an opportunity to work at Studio 10, which was like their creative production company within NBC. Okay. So I was doing that for a while, and I was like, yo, wow, I love production, but like, not for these clients. Yeah. So like then I started just shooting my own music videos, started working closely with Dave. We were throwing shows around the city, and then doing that kind of work. At one point we were like throwing 5 shows a week, at venues all around the city. And then I ended up getting recruited to work at a marketing agency called Fame House. Okay. And I'm a kid. I'm like, what? I don't know, maybe 22, 23, something like that. So they recruit me to work at Fame House. They're like, yo, clearly you know something about marketing. Y'all are selling out these like shows and open mics and all that stuff. So they taught me like real digital strategy. They were like, yo, we'll take this, polish you up. And then I walked into a client roster of Eminem, Ice Cube, Shady Records, Live Miami, which is like one of the biggest clubs in Miami. Yeah. So I'm doing marketing campaigns for them, and I did that for a couple of years. And I had a really breakout campaign that I was a part of that really broke a lot of records. And it gave me the confidence to be like, yo, you know what you're doing.
Yeah, you can do this.
And then at that point, it was like, yo, are you going to keep making millionaires more millions with these ideas and these concepts? Or can you teach the exact same strategies to your homies who can go from $0 to $60,000 a year this year? So that was like the defining moment for me to say, yo, as good as this job is, clear growth opportunity, I can just keep growing and getting promoted. I'm already working for the biggest names in the industry. It's like, or you can bet on yourself and really do this thing that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a really easy decision.
So were you able to use those connections or that network? Because that's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately. Is like the network.
Sure.
The network, and it's funny. Just a recent. This might go out in a couple months, but like Sam Altman was weekend that just happened, and like what I've been thinking about, like his network of people, the fact that they got him back in the room. He just posted a photo right before we got here. Like,
I saw that.
It's like, you know, the fact that his network of people and how he treats people.
Sam's good forever.
Clearly you have a network of people that were around you that are now, again, as with Rec Philly, it's just getting stronger and stronger and stronger.
Sure.
But at that time, did you leverage that network? Or was it kind of like, I gotta go do this?
In the beginning, my network definitely wasn't what it is now. That's for sure. But it's so funny. I was just like such a, I don't know, brazen young person in my 20s. So like literally I remember the day that I decided to quit Fame House. I went to the founder, one of the co-founders, Mike, and I was like, look, man, my time has come. I'm out. And he's like, are you guys like even making money yet? And I was like, nope, but we will. I'm gonna figure it out. And I'm like, but don't worry. I'm like, at one point, either, we'll partner on something together, or like, Rec can be a client of Fame House. I used to do a bunch of digital strategy and merch campaigns and all that. And he's like, all right, but like our retainers are pretty steep, bro. So like, I don't know. And I'm like, don't worry. And then it's funny because just a couple years ago, we ended up bringing Mike on as an advisor of Rec. So it's like technically like partners, right? So it was like full circle. But back then, man, no, I felt like I had to kind of like jump ship and then just go do my thing. And like I was so friendly with like my manager, Brian, back then. And like he would come and do like workshops at Rec every now and then, things like that. But I don't know if at that time I just was deep in the game enough to have built the real relationship capital that would have been helpful at that time.
Yeah.
I was only there for a couple of years.
And you're also young. And that's the other
super
thing.
young. I was like a bright-eyed 23, 24-year-old kid.
Yeah. So. It takes time to build that.
Yeah, you got to go off and do what you say you're going to do for a half a decade. Yeah. And then you start getting people to answer your emails.
Exactly. But dealing with like those, again, like you said, like high performers.
Yeah.
What is that difference? And you mentioned, what is different that's wired different? Is there this, because like, again, I think that there's multiple things here at play. Like there's an energy field of, again, as I mentioned, you walking into the room, there's an energy field that people carry. Yeah. And those are vibrating on a higher
That's a fact. That's
frequency.
True.
Yeah. And then also the way that they think.
Yep.
They're thinking and they're seeing things. Like we don't visually see decisions. Right. But in our heads, we're mapping if this can. And again, I've heard you describe yourself as a problem solver. So the way that your head is working is a map and you're making these decisions. But what is it about these people that helps them get to this point and then stay there? Because there's a difference.
I don't know if I can just give you a silver bullet answer for like this encompasses everybody, but I can give you some of the things that I've noticed, right, that a lot of high performers have in common. One is a deep level of self-belief. That's like the first one. That's like the one that even gives you permission to play the game or not. Really. And like it was my first tattoo. He who says he can and he who says he can't. Both correct. Yeah. Right. And like there's just certain people where like you ask them, hey, you want to go do this thing? And like their brain is wired to think of all the reasons why it'll go wrong. But then there's a whole nother set of people where hey, you want to go do this thing? And they're like, immediately, these are all the things that can go right. Yeah. And there's a level of optimism there, but it's also just faith. You know what I'm saying? And that's a muscle that you can build. Like for me, I'm really grateful I was born into a family that like faith was always important, right? So like even when we didn't have, my grandmother was always telling me what was possible. Right. Like I grew up in a household where like I literally could not say the word can't. Like my grandmother would never have it. Like she'd be like, oh, it could be difficult, but that doesn't mean you can't. Yeah. Right. That just means you have to work harder. Right. Like that whole thing. But she was conditioning me to be that kind of person that like would just see a problem as an opportunity. And that's another thing of high achievers. Some people see problems as like roadblocks that you can't get around. Other people just see an opportunity to flex. Yeah. Like, oh, sales are down. Perfect. Put me in.
Yeah.
Because they know that they're going to create value and they're going to fix the thing. And there's a reward that comes with that, right?
So that's how these people are thinking. They're thinking about
thinking.
all the ways that they can.
Yeah.
And the ways that they, again, like
Clarence Avon, he says, I don't have problems, I have friends. Right? Because every problem can be solved by the right conversation with the right friend.
Yeah. And there's always, as you were saying that, it just reminded me in my head, I was just thinking about Kevin Garnett, anything is possible when he's ripping his jersey.
Straight up.
And it's just like, it really is. And it is
a fact.
Again, back to like our brains, like they're so powerful. They're the most powerful things in the world. And like
100%.
You can, and everything starts with an idea.
Yeah.
And it starts with an idea and then it starts to come into the physical world.
Yep. So there's that. There's like, just like that, hey, they know that they can, right? There's that level of self-belief. I think 2, they're great relationship builders. So they know that like through relationships is the key. One of my mentors recently told me, he was like, bro, as an entrepreneur, you don't have to know how to do everything. You just have to know someone who knows how to do all the things. Right? Like you don't have to solve every problem. You just have to know someone who's solved the problem before. So now my job as a good entrepreneur is to be well networked enough that when I run into a problem, I know someone who's already solved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my job.
And so that's more of a CEO thing, because I think that back to Sam Altman, they were saying like, he's not the most technical guy.
Doesn't matter.
Exactly. And that's
Steve Jobs was the most technical guy.
Yeah. And then to have Johnny Ive and to have all these people around him that were able to do it.
Yeah. So I think there's that. I think there's also something about like the amount that we care about what other people think of us. Right. And it can go on both sides of the spectrum. There's a lot of people who are really successful. And a part of it is they just didn't care about what people thought of them.
Yeah.
They were willing to be weird, right? Fucking walk around with no shoes on, right? Steve Jobs style or yada, yada, yada. But then there's also people who get driven to success because they deeply care what other people think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And it's like that level of wanting to prove people wrong, right? Michael Jordan says that like he was Michael Jordan because he got cut from the team in 8th grade and he wanted to prove someone wrong, right? So there's also that. Because I think that desire to achieve comes from somewhere,
Yeah, it's just a switch.
Yeah,
and I do think it is in more people than get there. I think that there's, again, back to the drug dealers. Like there's with enough of the right moves in life, with enough of the right support system, with enough of the right again, butterfly effect of like little things happening. I think back, I was interviewing this summer and I got through 5 rounds of an interview and it didn't work out. I was so bummed. I was like crushed. I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, this is going to give me the finances to be able to like move this quicker, all these things. And then I realized I wouldn't have gotten connected to Julian.
Sure.
I wouldn't have gotten, all these different things. And now all these conversations, I would have met you.
That's
just
cool,
like,
man.
it's supposed to happen the way that it's supposed to happen. And that's another thing, having faith.
Like knowing that it's all working out for your good.
Yeah.
Because really there's not much value in pessimism. You know what I'm saying? Like, some people think there is, but like when you really run all the outcomes, like you start to waste your time, because most of the things that we get anxiety about, 90% of them never happen.
Yeah. So what do you, so that's it's funny. I've had this question at the beginning or at the end of the podcast, but now I'm going to throw it right in the middle is like, how are you doing? How's life? Like, how is everything that you're, again, as a man, you have this business, you have, again, relationships, all these different things, friendships, but how's Will?
Man, Will is grinding, bro. I'm getting to it. On a serious note, man, like this year has been one of the most difficult years of my life, just because the elevation of the business has required a deep elevation of my personal life as a leader. And there's a lot of just emotional decisions that have had to be made lately, and, just new levels, new devils, man. A lot of that is very real. But I'm navigating, man, day by day. And I think the thing for me, that I feel like is like my cheat code is like, I do have my faith.
Yeah.
So I'm always that person who can, like, no matter what, I can find a way to show up, and show up with a positive spirit. So, generally, man, like my answer is I'm blessed, bro.
Yeah.
And again, I think one of the things that helps me calibrate that is like, no matter how difficult the season that I'm in the moment, I'm blessed to have such a beautiful, like, visibility to where I've come from.
Yeah.
So when I compare the problems that I can complain about right now to like where I used to be, it's like, come on, bro, you prayed for these types of problems, right? Like these is the problems that literally like you hope to have, because they're symbols of what's to come. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm great, man. On the macro, super happy. I'm blessed, man. I wake up every day doing something I genuinely care about, around some people that I really, care about. And
because how many employees do you have now?
Right now, there's 12 of us.
Okay.
At our peak, we were at 24.
Okay. I imagine, was that like pre-COVID?
No, that was like actually less than 9 months ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and like that's a part of what's been really difficult about this year. Just shifting the business and like really learning how to be a more mature businessman of like doing what's best for the business.
I would say, did you have to do layoffs like the rest of the world?
I did, bro. Just like the rest of the world, I had to do layoffs.
Suck?
Dude, it was the worst. It was honestly probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do as an entrepreneur. To sit across the table and look people in the eye who have been working for us for some of them 6, 7, 8, 9 years, right? Yeah. Since the very beginning, and be like, yo, this is your last day at Rec. Like, those are conversations that I hope to never have to have.
Yeah.
But when you get to a space and time when it's like, yo, this is big boy games, right?
Yeah.
Some people look at like, oh yeah, I got to raise some capital and like I'm expanding to a new market. They're like, yo, you made it, Will. And I'm like, nah, bro, we just started.
This is the start, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
and again, like you said, new problems.
Yeah, it's like, yo, a lot of people would look at where I'm at as a startup founder as like, oh, you're in the Olympics. But it's like, yo, getting to the Olympics was never the goal. Winning gold is the goal. So now the work starts, right?
Did you in any way feel responsible? Because again, like every company has been going through this,
Bruh.
But at the same time, I imagine,
bro, I felt responsible as a leader, man. I'm like, yo, I have to let these people know that they are not going to be working here. Like, these are people that trust me and have trusted me for some of them almost a decade of their life, and like we all wanted to ride out into the sunset together, right?
Yeah.
After exiting the business or whatever. So I couldn't help but to think about, my own failures as a leader. You know, what were the things that I could have done better? Why didn't I see this happen earlier? Why didn't I make the right decisions, earlier? But then you gotta remind yourself, like, that's not how it goes.
Yeah.
And also like having mentors again who have done the things.
Yeah.
It's like I go and I'm like, yo, man, I'm real beat up. I had to let go of 7 people. He's like, man, that's tough. I just let go of 55, bro. Like, you know? And it's just like, yo, that's where the economy's at.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like the conversation can toss to people be like, what, hey, like these people are, again, their back's up against the wall. They might not have bills to pay. They might have, like, that's true.
Yeah.
That is true. But there's also the human element of like what you also had to go through.
Yeah, straight up. And also like, bro, you also got to look at the you got to zoom out. Cause it's like, yo, I could beat myself up and say that like, yo, I failed because I had to let people go. But it's also like, bro, I was able to hold people down for the better part of a decade, and they never had to worry about whether or not their check was coming.
The other side of it.
These people have learned and grown and gained so many amazing skills and built such a great network. And now, because of the work they've done with us, can go on and work wherever.
Yeah.
And be able to say that I was a part of, taking a startup from zero to millions of dollars in revenue, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a badge of honor.
Yeah.
So it's like, I didn't really fail these people. And like the time, we just have to rewire what success looks like. Cause like, I think maybe we were in La La Land thinking that like, you're going to take the original people all the way to the thing 15 years down the road. Most companies, that's not the story. Yeah.
Right? And it's also like that time.
And everyone plays a role at a certain time in a certain season.
Yeah. And I think a lot about growth, about, I got to start calling this something because I explained it on like every episode of like, again, thinking about the world being, if it is this one bigger consciousness, thinking about the individual person, a unit of us 3 people here, a classroom of 20 people, a football team of 75.
It's all fractal.
Yeah. They're just getting, bigger and bigger and bigger. And personally, some of the best growth in my life has come from breaking.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to break. And I think there's these situations, again, OpenAI, I'd watch out. If they get Sam Altman back in there, they went through this, could be described as, I don't want the word traumatic gets thrown out a lot, but in a business sense, that is a traumatic situation. Yeah. Your CEO just gets fired on a Friday at 4 p.m. and then it's just like, again, like who knows what the real situation is going on at this point. We don't know enough, but like those kinds of businesses, like when you break.
No, dude, you have to.
Yeah.
Like if you break your arm, like usually the doctors have to break it more before they can put it back into place.
Oh, really? I've never heard about that.
Yeah. They got to do it. Like,
I've heard that with your nose. If you break, you got to break it the other way.
Yeah. So it's just like, I look at it like that. And I think it's just, we're in a cool opportunity for growth to be like, sometimes things have to contract before they expand properly, And, I'll just be real, bro. Like, the reason why we had to do what we need to do with layoffs, a lot of it was because one, there were things we just couldn't predict about the timeline of Miami and all that stuff. But even more deeply, and to take accountability for it, it's like I made a lot of decisions as a leader based around the people, right? As opposed to making just great business decisions.
How hard is that? Because you're
to recognize it on the back end, hard.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, dang. Right. It's like, there are certain roles that we just started to like create for people. It's like, oh, we really want you to just be around. We don't really need your role and you don't really want to do your role. So let's just make another role for you and pay you a salary and benefits. And it's like, that is not entrepreneurship, bro. Like, so I had to learn that.
And those are mistakes that you've made.
Yeah, those are mistakes that we made, so eventually you just have to correct it.
Yeah. Because it's interesting. It's like morally right to put business first over people, to take care of the people. In a super backwards way. Yeah. And I always, you hear people in the world of business talk about like companies being a family. It's like, well, it's a really hard.
I will say, our startup was one of those startups that in the beginning we used to say that all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But I will never say that again.
Yeah, because that's and
it's just
different phase, different season. At that time, it kind of was a family. You were all in it together, and then now you have to start making these. Yeah. I don't want to say unemotional decisions, because it does take emotional intelligence to make these hard business decisions.
That's right.
But it has to be done, and somebody has to do it.
That's right.
And that's you.
That's right.
And that's like,
and fortunately I have a co-founder, so we get to wallow in it all together.
Yeah. How helpful has that been?
Oh, dude, it's really helpful. It's really, really helpful.
To be a little bit less lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. But, it's friction in that too. Literally we've known each other. I've known Dave literally at this point for more of my life than I haven't known him.
Really?
Yeah. Like we met when we were like 15 or 16 years old. So like he's known me in every season of growth and development and vice versa. So it definitely is helpful to have someone who just knows you deeply, knows your heart, knows, your makeup, to go through these things together with and remind you of how far you've come and all that.
Yeah.
But it's also difficult too, because like you have to figure out how to prioritize your business relationship or your friendship. Yeah. Right. Which sometimes can be difficult for people.
Yeah. You're juggling a couple different things and a couple different. I'm like a visual guy. Like I think about it in lanes. You have a friendship lane, you have a business lane, you have like a history of all the memories and stuff that you have together. And then you have to turn certain off.
So much
at different times.
But going back to your question though, of just like, how am I, man? I'm good, bro. But again, it's when I say I'm good, it's not that means that things aren't hard. Yeah. Because they are. But I'm good just because one, I'm blessed, I'm good. And also I know that like we're going to be able to dominate this next year. Yeah. And achieve what we need to.
So what's coming up? What do you got cooking?
Dude, it's cooking so much. I mean, just 2 days ago, we announced year 4 of our Black Music City project, which is a grant project we do every year. We're about to give out $150,000 of cash grants to creators, which is cool. We got Rec Miami coming next year. So about to,
Is that going to be your second location?
That'll be our second location.
Is that the first time that you're opening one? Second location?
Yeah, man.
You scared?
Dog, I feel every way. I'm excited. I'm more excited than I am scared. But it's complex, man. Like we built what we built, here in a city that we're from. Yeah. And that was challenging. So now doing that hundreds of miles away.
Yeah. Is a whole Are you going to move down there?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Are you going to try to recreate what you've done in Rec Philly? Or are you going to try to?
Nah, it's got to evolve.
Yeah.
It's evolve. I mean, like the essence is going to be the same, right? Mm-hmm. It'll still be, the physical space down there. But what studios we have down there are different based off of what we've learned about the creative community there. Yeah. So, more visual labs, right? A little less recording studios just to, serve the needs.
Because up here you have something like, what is it, like 16 studios?
So we've got 14.
Okay.
14 here. And then in Miami, we have 14 and 10,000 square feet. In Miami, the building is 2 floors. It's 12,000 square feet. So it's 20% bigger on the inside. And then we also have a 10,000 square foot backyard in Miami. So there's like a whole outside
events coming.
Yeah. Crazy. So that's going to be sick. So doing that, bro. But I'm already like, we only talk about Miami, but like I'm already negotiating deals for other cities. Yeah. Right. So I spent a lot of my time going out to other places, scouting properties and negotiating development deals and all that. So I'm doing all that stuff. Still fundraising,
Yeah. You've got a lot cooking up there.
All the things, bro.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I got to meditate a lot.
Yeah. I was gonna say to think back to talk more about like mental health with creators, because again, I think that there's things like that, like meditation, that help people be able to deal with these things. Like, how are you outside of journaling, outside of faith? are you dealing with, I guess when you deal with these things, is it, I don't want to say like, is it proactive now at this point in your life where you're kind of, hey, I know this bothers me. I know this gives me anxiety.
Yeah.
I know I got to do this. I know
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's always clearest in the moment. But yeah, the proactive ritual is where the proactive work happens, right? Like the morning routine is a proactive solution, right? Like the fact that I read my Bible every morning is a proactive solution. The fact that I play tennis 3 times a week is a proactive solution.
Nice.
Right? So those are those things. But then I'm still good for like, dang, I just had 4 meetings back to back to back to back. Like I need 10 minutes to meditate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I still do that. So it's the balance. It's proactive, and it's also just like being present enough to just know how you feel in a moment.
Yeah.
Have you,
Nicole mentioned, did you do like a mental health panel? Was that?
Probably. Yeah. Not probably. Yes.
Have you? Yeah. I was going to say, have you been speaking up about this, for a long time now?
I wouldn't say a long time, but I'd say the last few years. So if that's a long time, then maybe.
Yeah, it kind of is in the world of mental health.
Sure.
It feels like for guys, it's been like 5 years.
I'll say I started doing it a little bit before it was cool. But the reason I did it, bro, is because, I've had some really life-changing experiences through therapy, through, leadership training and things like that. And I cannot understate the shift in my being from leaning into those things and doing things like shadow work and having men's groups. So I'm just someone who like wants to not hide that value from the people I care about. So like anyone who's like looking up to me, especially the youth, like when they come to me and they're like, Will, I want to do something like you, man. I want to be able to make money and be cool and live a cool lifestyle. Like I never hide. I'd be like, oh, bet you in therapy?
I was gonna say, like,
you know what I'm saying?
What's your therapy journey? Because it's for everybody.
It's different,
and it's something I've had a few friends that since like I've been open about my therapeutic journey have started to go to therapy. And it's a gift. It is an entire. I think it sounds so scary. My story is like I canceled my first 3 appointments because I was scared.
Really? Yeah. That's real resistance.
I read Kevin Love's article in the Players Tribune about how he had anxiety and panic attacks.
Wow.
And then I was like, all right, like if he can do it, then like maybe I can go talk about my feelings.
Yeah.
And I remember being in my first couple sessions, like, no, I don't have any, there's nothing going on. I don't really have any addiction issues. Like, everything was off. Like, but it's a mirror in there.
100%.
And what was the start of your therapy journey?
Yeah. Wow. What was the start? Well, that's so interesting. I mean, I've been at it for years now. In the beginning, I have to say that like I was coming from a deficit because I felt guilty for even thinking about going to therapy.
Really?
Yeah, because like I don't come from a community that like praised therapy. It was like therapy was like it was almost like a rich person thing. Like you know what I mean? Like,
and you kind of like the shrink
perception. Yeah. And also it was like, oh, if you go therapy, then you're implying that you're not well, right? And then also I felt like if I'm gonna be in therapy talking about all my family issues, I feel like I'm like diming them out or something, right? And these are just things culturally you have to just work through.
Yeah.
So I think I was adverse to it at first, and then I just had some real life things that were happening, bro. Where like I was just in a spot where I knew the stakes were really high. And, this is at the time where rec is still in the warehouse. Before we have this $1 million facility in Center City, right? We were up in 9th and Dolphin in North Philly.
Okay.
Grinding it out in this warehouse. And we were really trying to go from, it was just me, Dave, and there was probably about 6 of us as employees that were, most of which donating their time because they weren't getting paid what they're worth. And like, we were trying to transition from just being this little clubhouse to actually being a real business. And, I watched this video, I think it was John C. Maxwell, and he broke down this concept that he called the law of the lid. And he said, it's important for every leader to just accept the fact that your business will never be more successful than your personal level of leadership. And I was like,
wow.
Dang. So it was almost this call to action to be like, bro, like if you want to grow the business, you better grow yourself as a human.
Yeah.
There's no other way. Period.
Yeah, you got to start with you first.
Yep. So, and then I had a death in the family, bro. And I remember there was this moment I just broke down in the warehouse just by myself, bro, and was just going through it. And fortunately, ended up doing some leadership training stuff, and like that really kind of like put me on the path of just like personal development and growth. And I'm so grateful for it all because it happened in this ridiculously nothing but God way. But then after that, I remember being like, all right, it's go time. And then I started the whole like, I think you have to like date therapists, right? Like you have to like find the one for you.
Yeah.
So I started that process and then found one that felt really good. We did great work for like 18 months, you know. Then I kind of like took a pause and was like, all right, let me go apply the things I learned, right?
Yeah.
And then went right back into it a little bit later. So I had another great therapist for a couple of years. So, but since those starting days, man, like I've been able to really pinpoint how I was showing up as a person before and then after, because I did it in such a pivotal moment in my business.
Yeah.
So I know who Will was as a leader before, and then I know who he started to become right after through things like fundraising, which is like one of the most difficult things that entrepreneurs do.
Yeah.
Like just for a second, like think about what it looks like to be a kid in his 20s, sleeping in this warehouse, right, in the middle of the hood of North Philly, up 4 flights of stairs, not know where your next meal is coming from, but then try to have the courage to convince someone to hand you $1 million. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that's where I was.
Yeah. The
You know?
front that you have to put on at
Bruh.
that point that of strength and of reliability.
Yep. And another quote that really helped me, there's a woman named Arlen Hamilton, and she's an incredible VC, and she's a Black queer woman, which is like all the opposite of what VC community is, right? And I remember she was giving a talk one time, and I was asking her for advice on fundraising. She was like, yo, if you really want my advice, here it is. She goes, if you want to attract money, like if you want someone to give you money, well, first you have to be money. And I was like, oh shit, right? And I was like, okay, I get it. I can't go off and try to have people want to give me something that I'm not.
Yeah.
Right? So I was like, okay, cool. I need to do all the work that I need to do to become someone who is quote unquote worthy of these things, right? Not worthy from a space of like as a person, but like as a leader, as a man, right? Like as
the way that you carried yourself. Yeah. It's interesting. It's
had to work all that stuff out.
Yeah. You like kind of have to do it first, which is you have to act the part before you get the part.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, just because I'm thinking about all of the different creators that you interact with, whether it be music, whether it be art, whether it be dancing, whether it be like you're seeing art in so many different ways. Mm-hmm. And the common threads between all those kinds of people is just fascinating to me. Because it's like you're a creator yourself who's dealing with all of these creators, but what you've created is a reflection of you 100%. And who you are.
And bro, and the reality is like, if I didn't take the time to start my healing process, I wouldn't have been the person who is capable at creating a space that feels safe enough for creators to create in.
Yeah. So what did you learn? What did you learn from therapy early on that was like, either whether it's a problem that you would attack within yourself to be able to...
Bro, I learned so much.
Again,
now the podcast starts.
Yeah. It's like 3-4 hours. Yeah.
Bro, so much, man. I mean, I can talk about it just like personally, and then I can talk about certain things that showed up in the business.
Like, were you in your own way? Were you like, what was
Bro, so much. Man, one, I learned that I was a people pleaser, right? I learned that like the way I learned how to navigate life was just to make sure people liked me, because I felt like it was dangerous if people didn't like me, right? I learned that I felt like I was a burden, you know, again, coming from a childhood where it's like, I didn't have either of my parents, right? So it felt like my parents made decisions for other things that weren't about me. So it was almost like, oh, well, guess I wasn't worth it, right? Like there's this whole like, all right, well, whoever does love me, I got to make sure I'm not a big enough burden that they'll abandon me, right?
Yeah.
So I had to unlearn all that stuff, man. I had to rewire like just how I thought about myself and what self-worth looked like. I had to unlearn like making myself small, right? Like I was a person who was like achieving great things, but like if you ask me about it, I'd be like, oh, well, you know, it's just a thing.
It's going well.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and even now, like, I still have to be mindful of that. Like, I'm a person who, like, I don't like being like, yo, I'm Forbes 30 under 30 winner. I don't like being like, yo, I have a fucking 7-figure business. Right? Like, and worth 8, you know? Like, so those are things that I just had to unlearn. I had to really examine my relationship to money. there's so much, bro. Like,
yeah.
you know, but
And that's the thing. It's like with therapy, you're unpacking all of these things,
mm-hmm.
and it's such a long journey.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've tried to express to other people about. Like, it's hundreds, not even hundreds, thousands of hours of work.
Yeah.
Because therapy is also the meditation that you're doing, the prayer that you're doing, all of those other things that like you're studying you. Yeah. And the better that you know yourself, and this is personal opinion, the better that you get to know other people.
100%.
And it's when you dive, and I've literally written it in this thing. It was like, the more I learned about myself, the more I was like, what the fuck is going on with everybody else? Like, what it is like.
So me learning that about myself and just some of the things that I was working through, I'm like, well, I'm leading a community of creatives who all are tackling similar issues.
Yeah.
You know, and then I got to a point where I started to learn things like, oh, there's a whole school of study called trauma-informed care, right? How to actually like create space and hold space for people who have experienced certain levels of trauma.
Yeah.
Right? So I realized that like, until I was willing to like really sit with and face my own trauma, I couldn't even create a safe enough environment for my staff to be at their best, who had all experienced some level of trauma, more than likely, right? So if we all don't get it and all respect our own stories and our own healing, then we can't even show up for our members who definitely have experienced some level of trauma to actually be the thing. So there's a level of intention that I got to carry after that. And I'll never forget, man, I literally like, I came out of that and was like, we need to break everything and start over. Because there were little decisions we would make about the product that weren't in alignment to what I was learning in trauma-informed care practice. And I realized that we were unintentionally triggering some people.
Interesting. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I can give you like a small example, right? Yeah. So in this framework of America that we all live in, something small, like for people of color, there is very few spaces in our lives where being associated with a number is a positive experience, right? You're in the hospital, you have a fucking patient ID number. You're in prison, you're just, they just call you as a number, right? Your identity becomes a number. So one of the things in the warehouse when we were building Rec early on, I was like, yo, to make it simpler for people to check in and all that kind of stuff, let's just give everyone a member card and let's give everyone a member number, right? And it was really just because I was like, it was easier.
Yeah, you weren't thinking about that, like.
But then I'm like, I started to unpack it and we're like checking people in. We're like, oh, 347, yada, yada. And I was like, why do we do that?
Wow.
Right? And I was like, break it. We're not doing that. There's no such thing as member numbers here. We're not, right? Because you don't know, but like someone might have been in the foster care system and got associated with a number, and then they come to Rec to be safe and be seen, to create, to express, and they're unintentionally, triggered.
Yeah, and that's there's such deep seated, like they're hundreds, if not thousands of years old, those kinds of things. Like I had Frank Jackson, who's a positive psychologist. He's one of the, I think he said there's only like 30 Black positive psychologists in the country. And he's one of them. He's the youngest too. Went to Penn, studied under Martin Seligman and everything. And he wrote this beautiful paper called The Pearl Effect. And we had him in here to talk about all of it. And he's like, all of these things, like the racism and the traumas that Black people have had to deal with are so, like, they go back to, like, he talked about like doing the ring shouts and different things, like all of these different things. So like, I just like never understood about how these things are all associated, and to have those kind of, like I've never, just like that with a number, I wouldn't have ever thought of that. Yeah, man. And now that you think about it, you can't unsee it, you can't unhear it. Like,
yeah. So it just takes a level of thoughtfulness and intention. And that's why, like, if we're really going to solve some of these big social problems, we just have to get to a place where we feel comfortable putting people of color in leadership. Because if you don't, you can't assume that someone who doesn't have the lived experience has the knowledge or the capability of creating new systems for people that validate their lived experience.
Yeah.
So for example, when we go back to like AI, if Black people are not designing algorithms for AI, it's going to only just carry on the implicit bias that the people who designing the algorithms already have.
And that's already a problem. Like,
it's already a problem. Yeah. But we have a problem as Americans, unfortunately, and I'm just going to say it, we have a problem putting people of color in leadership and actually allowing them to lead.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, we'll just do it just to like say we did so we can like wave the DEI flag. But like,
that was what I wanted to get to next, was your opinions on DEI stuff. Cause it seems like, again, everything is the intentions are the right thing.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they get way too far.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, wait, this isn't what we were, you know what I mean? Like, this is what we were trying to do. This isn't helping anybody, or this is creating more problems. Like, what is it? It kind of, to me, it seems like the state of things are in that. And I said this the other day where, again, I'm starting to like say things where I used to be in fear of like what people would think about this, but like I support like people with transgender, everything like that. Like I support that. Like it's just so everywhere now. It's like I'm like at Trader Joe's, like, and it's like on. It's just like everything is. It's gotten to that point where it feels like it's gotten too much.
Sure.
But at the same time, like I haven't lived that experience.
Yeah.
So I don't know when enough is enough. But what is enough? Like what is you know for I don't know.
So I haven't lived that experience either. So I'm just gonna say I don't know enough to speak on that.
Yeah.
But I do know about the Black experience. So
Yeah.
I'll just say, as a Black man, I personally feel like DEI efforts are important, but I don't think the practices that we're seeing happen right now are meaningful solutions. So for me, right, like you can go and tell us how many billions of dollars you're going to pledge to Black people, and you can tell us how you're going to hire people to work at your company who are people of color. But until like your board and your C-suite reflects the population breakdown of America, you're just talking. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Like it's as simple as that, bro. Like you can't tell me that your company is a safe space for all people to work, but then like I look at the decision making quadrant, right, the executive suite and above, and everyone's white. It just like you're pissing on us and telling us it's rain, right? So I think it's like let's just have real conversations like that. And I think we also have to reframe the diversity and equity proposition. Like I think a lot of times DEI is in the framework of like, this is the right thing to do morally.
Yeah.
Right? It's almost in like a kumbaya, we owe it to you perspective, which kind of you do, but fuck that. I don't care about that conversation at all. I only want to have the conversation around real diversity is a great business case. And companies who do not take strides to create real diversity, they're just leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the money case. I don't want to talk about the social case, because for real, in my opinion, I believe in equity through equity, which means like we're going to get social equity at the point that we have financial equity.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like, yo, go pay Black people. Don't just do the song and dance. Give Black people real decision-making power.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I think about it as diversity of thought being more important than even diversity of, again, what everybody sees.
Sure.
Because it's just like, you can do those things like you're saying, and then everybody gets in line the way that everybody, you know.
And that's usually what happens.
It's just like waving a flag. It's like,
that's usually what happens.
Like you're saying, we're not dealing with the problem.
Yeah. DEI, as it traditionally stands, unfortunately, is a lot of times they'll go and they'll get people that have brown faces who are most willing to align themselves to the thinking of white men.
Yeah.
Right. And like, it is what it is. So I'm not telling like fellow people of color, don't take the checks. Like, do whatever you got to do for you. Right. But like, if we want substantial change, like, we actually have to diversify in all of the ways.
Yeah. And that's I want to have these conversations, but it's another one of those things where it's like, I don't know the right answers. I'm trying to, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to learn. I think the first part is having the conversation, just hearing the diversity of perspectives, because
like for me, bro, I just want to see, like, if we were to take a quick look at all of the Fortune 500 companies, just show me your C-suite and your board of directors. Like, don't tell me how much money you pledge to Black people. Just show me that. And I think we would have a different conversation if that's how the conversation started.
Yeah. And it's funny. I'm just thinking back to, again, your childhood and looking up to different people, like seeing an example. And that's what, like, you're the example now for other young people that could, again, decide like, oh, wait, like I could go and fuck around and deal drugs or do whatever. Like, to literally do whatever. And no, here's an example, like I can, and you need to see that. I think that's the thing, is literally back to like me seeing Kevin Love writing that article. That was me seeing somebody that I related to through just because I love of sports and basketball, which I'm terrible at, but like I could see, all right, well, somebody, he's doing it, so then maybe I could do it. 100%. You need to see that.
And that's why there's a real responsibility that comes with it, man.
Yeah.
You know, some people choose to take it and some don't, but you know, I think I have a responsibility not only to just be the first one, but to like open the door for the next.
Yeah.
Right.
I do want to hear about like the rest of your plans for Rec Philly, not in the immediate, more in the 20-year vision.
Sure.
Where are we trying to get to? What is the end goal?
Yeah. Yeah, man, the big vision is we just want to make it so creators all around the world, no matter what city you're in, you have a real access point to get access to quality resources, you know, creative space, studios and all that, clear pathway to connect with other like-minded creative people, and an opportunity to get paid to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's this idea of like the starving artist. So we would like to just contribute to dispelling that myth, you know? So when a young creative kid, you know, from London or Johannesburg or I don't know, Berlin says, hey, I want to be a designer, your parents don't ask you what's plan B.
Yeah.
Right. Because we've normalized, one, this idea of creative entrepreneurship, that it's actually possible to build a business around your passion, and that the resources are accessible. Yeah. So what I think that'll look like and what we're gunning for is, you know, 50 cities around the world, you know, and community of over 1 million creators that we're serving worldwide.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like everybody today, I mean, we're foot on the gas towards this creator economy.
100%, man. I mean, and I can say a couple things to that. One, it's just like what recreation meant to our generation was like sports.
Yeah.
Right. It was like, oh, go to the rec.
Yeah.
You know, and we're shooting hoops and doing all that stuff. But like recreation to the new generation and the one after is these phones, man. It's create content. So, you know, I think that's just a whole cultural shift that's happening. And the fact that we're also happening at a time when like direct to consumer business building is growing, you know, people are making real money, you know, it's just a whole different world. And like, there's people like, I don't know if you know who like Mr. Beast is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Allegedly the first $1 billion creator, right? He's built all these other brands and companies and whatnot. But places like Goldman Sachs are now saying that by 2027, which isn't that long from now, the creator economy is going to be over about $500 billion, 480 billion. And to me, I get excited by that because that's just the stuff that they're measuring right now.
Yeah.
You know, like
because doesn't it seem like they might already, I mean, I think about creators like Kim Kardashian's a creator, isn't she?
Yeah. I think it's all about like how you define who a creator is. But it's the idea that like they're usually measuring that by like, okay, what kind of ad spend's going towards influencer marketing? They're tracking Google AdSense and how much people are making from like advertising against content online. But what they're not even measuring is like, I know mad homies that are artists who just booked a photographer for $500 and cash apped them, and that's not on the market.
Yes,
right? Like,
yeah.
All these like kind of the underground economy stuff. Right?
Yeah.
So for us, man, I think we have an incredible opportunity to grow the creator economy even bigger than what it already is, because we can bring some of those payments above board and make it easier for creators to transact.
Yeah.
Right? And
so did you see that coming? Like when you started out, did you see this coming?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's nuts.
Because again, like to keep it in mind.
Because now it's obvious. Like,
yeah, it's obvious now.
But,
it's trending
you were doing
on
this 10 years ago.
Yeah, a decade ago, man. Like, you know, I always tell people I was really blessed that we got to solve our own problem first. Like I was a creator who wanted to learn how to make money, right? But when I got recruited to work at Fame House, it was such a blessing because again, I'm working for Ice Cube. I'm working for Eminem. So my whole job was to create digital campaigns to help them make money, right? So a lot of times they would come to us and be like, all right, we got to make $250,000 for Eminem this quarter, but we can't use any of Marshall's time, right? So it was like, I can't have Eminem make a video to do this thing. All I had to work with was the brand of Eminem. And I would just have to come up with ideas of how we can engage his fans to create cool ideas to make money.
So how'd you do that? Like, because I'm trying to make it make sense in my head, and I don't even know where this is going. Like,
yeah, I mean, a bunch of different ways. Like, hey, Eminem is dope and has an awesome brand. G-Shock is a really cool watch company. Let's think about the Marshall Mathers G-Shock, right?
Yeah. And
we just can collab on that, and then all of a sudden you launch this watch that makes $400,000 in like a couple weeks, right? Or like another cool thing. You know, at one point, M's studio flooded, right? The OG studio where he wrote some of the best hits. We were like, yo, all right, well, this is a tragic thing. The studio flooded, but like, there's such a deep affinity that fans have to the brand. Let's sell bricks from the studio. Went crazy, right? Super, super successful. But anyway, it was just all about knowing how to be authentically them, right, online. So I had a privilege of saying, from the top of the industry, I know what direct to consumer looks like, where we don't have to worry about anything but the connection between the brand and the fan. So I saw that. I'm like, oh, right now Eminem and Ice Cube are doing it, but like in 5 or 10 years, like my homies can do that.
Yeah.
And I don't have to do it at the scale of 10 million fans. Like I could do this with 10,000 followers.
Yeah.
Right. So I saw it clearly that there was going to be a time when like the power of the record label was going to go down, the power of the big, box office release was going to go down, the power of the big gallery was going to go down because we had access to the consumers directly. But I knew if creators were going to be able to do it well, especially creatives of color, we would need a very nuanced amenity set to participate. So it's like, yeah, we can compete with Hollywood, but not without cameras, we can't. Right? Like, so it was like, how do we create the thing that gives creators access to all the resources, all the people, and all of the information that they needed to be successful? And that's what Rec is.
Yeah. It's funny. I was laughing there because I just think it was a perfect display of how your brain works of solving problems.
That's it.
All right. Flooded, sell the bricks. Like the G-Shock did the same thing. It's just like your mind's working in this way that is.
And I can't take credit for all of those. Like those were ideas of like the team, I'm working with and beyond. But yeah, that's how my brain works though. It's like, it's a problem or it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
One or the other,
What are the next, like, again, like what's the next, it's such a silly question, but like, what's the next thing? Like, I think podcasts have taken over a lot of like media, like general media. There's when I think about the amount of time and attention that I'm spending and how I'm spending it, like podcasts for everybody, it seems like everybody that I know listens to podcasts in one way or another.
Sure.
The next thing I feel like after that was, and this is something I don't understand as well, is like the streaming, the Twitch, like there's just streamers out there.
That's here, bro.
Yeah, and like I don't get it, but it seems to be taking over this next. Yeah, it's not right, exactly.
That's okay.
But it's like there's kids out there that are just like people are just living their lives.
Yeah, I think that's what comes next. I think, and just conceptually, I think we went from 3, 6, and 10 were the major networks, right? Mm-hmm. And then we grew up with cable, and then now there's like 100 channels, and then it's like satellite or whatever. Now there's like 500 channels, right? And these networks are getting kind of like more and more niche. Oh, the food channel now, right? We got the weather channel and all these things. But I think we're getting to a point where like this era of social media is like, oh, every brand has a network now. Next is like every personality has a network. Right. So like a Kai Cenat, right? He's one of the biggest streamers online.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of kids who literally are like, I want Kai to be my filter for information. So I'm going to go and watch a live stream of his. Like his streams are like 8 to 10 hours. So imagine a kid gets home. They're either going to like think for themselves and like do whatever they want to do, or they'll just jump on Kai's stream and all of their friends are in the chat talking together, led by him because they fuck with his perspective. That's the future. The future is these tiny, tiny little nano networks that are led by just strong personalities. And I think people are just going to find the one that they're aligned with. And like, that's going to be how they rock.
Yeah. And that's just, I mean, the best and worst example, and I don't know too much about the guy, but like Andrew Tate, like the same, like that kind of thinking, like it's like literally infiltrated like young men's minds. Where it's I see you like I can't.
I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah. But I don't know which you could share, but like it's wild. Like these kids, like and I think back and you want to judge, but then I think like, well, if I was 12 years old and didn't know anything, and I see this guy that's shouting his mouth off and cutting to him smoking cigars in cars, and it's just like, well, obviously it's marketed to like do exactly what he's doing, and unfortunately it's worked. And like, my opinion would be like, because it's wild. I mean, some of the stuff is wild. I don't know. You're so much in your face right now for those that are just listening. Like, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
My thoughts on what exactly?
I mean, if you're willing to share about like kind of thoughts on the Andrew Tate type of personalities, those I don't want to call it like a wrecking ball, but like there's certain things. I know I listened on one of them. You're talking about a certain. Rainbow-haired creator or artist. Like again, like they're doing something on purpose and they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say this. I will say I feel fine saying Andrew Tate is better for society than Tekashi 6ix9ine by far. Full stop. No, even not even close. Because a Tekashi 6ix9ine hip hop artist, he's just a caricature like that. Is really meant to spew the worst parts of what some would perceive as black culture. So he doesn't, he's promoting gang violence and all this nonsense. The value set that he represents at the core of it, I think is harmful for society. I think Andrew Tate, although his tactics and the clickbait stuff and the way he says things is very like, if you don't dig into it, it can be very harmful at the surface. I do, though, believe that deep down, the value set that he's trying to present to the next generation of young men is more grounded, right? So because of that, I think there's something to be said about, one, the case study of how this guy from Romania that none of us knew about like 5 years ago to being one of the most popular people on the planet is something to be watched and to be studied
in general,
in collegiate courses and all that.
Yeah.
But if I go deeper, so I'm someone I've actually like taken the time to like watch a full interview of his.
Yeah.
Right?
And I haven't, that's the thing, is like I haven't, but I see.
Oh, you gotta do it.
It's so hard because you see, and again,
no, I gotta challenge you to do it. Just as someone who's in this space of mental health, manosphere or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just important that you watch it so you have full context.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like again, and anything is like anyone's like this, but if you just take that 45 seconds out of context, bull's trash.
Yeah.
But when you really understand what he's talking about within a 3-hour conversation, it made me look at him differently.
Yeah, and I think the context that I judge off of is how it has impacted young men at this young age. Yeah. And I think that there's some negative things there, but again, they maybe are not, again, emotionally or mentally mature enough to understand the root, like you're saying, like we talked about the intentions, and the root of it. Yeah, it's like
telling a woman to like put a number on her forehead is like the most absurd thing that you could ever say to a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah,
but teaching a man that his value in society is based off of his work ethic and his ability to be principled, his ability to like be in community with other strong men and just having self-worth and all that stuff. Yeah. That's good. I think like more men actually need that information because unfortunately we're at like an epidemic where a lot of men, at least in my community, don't even grow up in a household with other strong men.
Yeah.
Right. So then there's this lapse and then you start to get, raised by a more feminized perspective, right, of the world. So I think the reason why Andrew Tate grew to popularity so quickly is because he was speaking to an idea that men in close quarters and barbershops and in locker rooms were talking about a little bit, but could never talk about out loud.
Yeah.
And I think he gave language to a feeling that men had.
Yeah. And clearly there's something that's resonating within a lot of people.
Yeah, because from the beginning of a lot of organized civilization, like men thrived on structure and discipline and integrity and productivity and the ability to provide and protect. But now that same version of what some people would say is masculinity is almost like looked down upon by a lot of society. So men are like, well, what do I do now then? Because what starts to happen is like, I don't even feel comfortable in my own identity of all the things that I've been conditioned to be, right, biologically. But then also like, if I don't embody those things and then I grow up as a man who is all kind of flaky and weirdly emotional in the true sense and like all these other things, then I have a hard time finding a mate because women tend to be attracted to those other things.
Yeah.
And now we're all, well, what do I do now? I'm alone and I can't find a partner, but I can't be like a man in the way that I think I should be a man because I'm going to get canceled. And then it's like, now what?
Yeah,
now
it's a web.
You know? So I think like people like him, I think people like Kevin Samuels even, who I thought Kevin Samuels was a great.
I've never heard of him. I don't know.
You never heard of him?
No, you'll have to send me some of the stuff to check out.
It's funny. No one has the same internet. You
yeah,
know?
it's right. It is. It's so bizarre. And this is another. It's probably the most.
Think of Kevin Samuels real quick, just for the context. Kevin Samuels is like, imagine if Andrew Tate was a 48-year-old black man who wore a suit and was a little bit less controversial. Only a little.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because
and he recently passed away, unfortunately. So rest in peace, Kevin Samuels.
Rest in peace. It's one of the things that, again, trying to hold two ideas in my head at the same time.
Yeah.
And this is what I say. I talk about. This is going to be the most controversial of any of the conversations I've had. But like, I always say politically, if you can't admit that Trump's a genius, I'm not going to talk. Or not that I'm not going to talk with you.
Sure. No, I get
conversation.
It. I see where you're going.
Regardless of what you think about his political anything, there's like he shot his mouth off. He sounds outrageous and all this stuff. He's a genius. He knew what he was doing. He executed a plan. He's one of the best marketers in the world.
Yeah.
And he did it.
Yeah.
And that just has to, and like you can say that and then also say the other side. And that has to be done. And again, like you were saying Obama, like the same thing.
Yeah.
There's no better fucking guy than Obama as far as like, you know, like he did it. He knew what he was doing. He captured the moment and he did it. And it's like these guys like Andrew Tate. And I don't know enough about him to speak at any kind of high level, but 5 years to go from unknown to this is something that again is possible now.
Right. And I think he, as a marketer, is great. He's a brilliant guy.
Well, so one of the guys I've been paying attention to politically, again, just paying attention to because I find him fascinating, is the Vivek Ramaswamy.
He's so fascinating. I pay close
like
attention.
just almost as a case study, just like, and I always laugh. I've been saying like, I'll give somebody $100 if they can find a video where he's not putting his hand on their shoulder, and it's so perfect.
He has the political science mastered.
Yeah, and it's so good that like that's why I was fascinated at first, and then I was like, well, wait a second, it's too good. It's almost like
he's like Trump through the lens of a brown person.
Which is crazy. And he tweets it like every day or like every week or something like that about like his 10 things about truth, and he talks a lot about the nuclear family. And again, I think he's on point. And this is another unfortunate. I had a conversation with a friend that said if he was white, it'd be a wrap.
In a bad way or in a good way?
He'd be president.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And that's crazy.
And he still might be. But
yeah,
he's right. I mean,
and again, the unfortunate, uncomfortable conversations that we have to have.
Yeah.
That is like, that's again, if we're going to talk about truth, that there's truth in that.
There's truth in the outcomes of nuclear families for children. Data.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm not saying that like, oh, if you're not from that, you're not a less of a person. Like, I'm not from that. But like, I'd be an idiot if I was like, oh, I want my kids to grow up like how I grew up. No.
Yeah.
My whole purpose is I got started here and then I carry the baton here so that my kids can start here and go here.
Yeah.
Right.
So does that drive you like personally a lot?
Yeah.
To be able to have that again, I mean, people say like you want what your parents gave you or what they did not give you, and to be able to provide that.
Yeah, bro. A lot of my drive is I have the blessing to be able to become the thing that I needed most when I was a kid, right? That positive role model, that positive male figure, right? That all the things. So for me, I'm so excited to be a father one day.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be amazing, bro. Like just cause.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me personally, I know that I want that nuclear family, bro.
Yeah.
I want a home filled with love, two parents for my children, because I've also seen the statistics of the outcomes if you don't have that, and I've also lived it, right? So like I happen to be the anomaly, right? You know, they say the statistics if you grow up without a father and this and that, way more likely to be incarcerated, way more likely to be poor, way more likely to be an addict, way more likely to be all these things. Right?
Statistically, you shouldn't be fundraising,
right? Statistically. And also, when you look at the statistics of just who fundraises, right, and how and what the outcomes are, it's like 0.002. So you multiply all those things, and it's like my existence is a miracle, right? But for me, man, it's like I'd be an idiot to not understand that there's real value in the nuclear. And
do you think that you're trying to? And this is a. Do you think that you're trying to like heal those wounds in that way? And we can't really go back and fix. You can't be your parent.
Yeah, it's called breaking generational curses.
Yeah.
Yeah, like. Man, I didn't have a dad. My dad didn't have a dad, right? Like, if I go back far enough, my dad's dad probably didn't have a dad, right? So, like, for me, it's not that I'm trying to, like, undo the fact that my dad and I's relationship is what it is, but I do know that I have an opportunity and a responsibility to try to stop that generational curse here.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, cool. That ends with me. So now all my son is going to know is a 2-parent household where dad loved mom. Right?
Yeah.
That's an opportunity. It's not a problem. Right?
Yeah.
It's just an opportunity.
What if there's something that your kids, when they're 18 years old, how would you want them to describe you as a dad?
Dang.
And you're not even, and again, you're not even married.
I'm not married. I'm not a father at all.
But when we go down this road, because I think that again, you're building those, you're working on that project. Already.
I am.
So
already, bro. I even tell people now, bro, like I'm making decisions for my grandchildren that don't exist yet. Mm-hmm. Straight up. You know what I'm saying? What would I like for my kids to say about their dad when they're 18? I want them to say that my dad was the sturdiest, dopest, smartest dude that I know. My dad was a man of faith who literally walked the walk as much as he talked the talk. He was a shining example of a present father who was loving, caring, stern when he needed to be. But I never once had to question whether or not he loved me. And I never questioned how far he would go to provide for me. And if I was just like him, I would be super happy.
That's awesome.
If that's what they say, it's lit.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So on the other side of the question, what is maybe something they'd say like, oh, I got dad's, I got that. Like,
I got dad's workaholic.
Yeah, because right? Again, like you were saying earlier, it's like there's two sides of all these things.
To be honest, I don't know if the issue is my kids work too much, then like we gonna work through it, right? But I'd take that over some other things that some parents be unfortunately having to deal with. But I think of it like this, man. I'm almost like expecting to have the opposite problem. Like I gotta figure out how do I make my kids not lazy because they come from everything, right? Like I gotta figure out how to make my kids not spoiled brats, right? Like I gotta figure out how to make nepotism only kind of the situation, right? Like, because that's just where it's gonna be at. They're gonna come from. They're not coming from public assistance and coming from like all of the stuff I came from. They're gonna be coming from, oh well, my dad's a really well-known, well-respected businessman. So like now I have the troubles of that, right? Like
that's incredible. I love the way that you speak about it as if it's already like one of the questions I like to ask people that are on a journey, especially in this way, is like, do you think that you've made it? Or what is making it and what is, and like the way that you were just talking about that, like you're already saying that
it's destiny.
Yeah.
It's destiny, man. And it's like, you can't run from your destiny, bro. Like, I don't know. It's hard to really like put into words.
It's a feeling.
Yeah. It's a knowing. It's a knowing, bro. I feel like when you're locked in with God, like, that like time is not linear, it's like, who I am now and like the characteristics I have, the habits that I have, the behaviors I do have already like rippled out into the universe and like created me 50 years from now. The same way the kid that I was in high school, the way I was a nerd, I was writing all of these business plans and was charismatic, learning how to get along with anybody. Like that created who I am today.
Yeah.
So it's like, the beauty of faith is like, you shouldn't wait until you're 50 with all the millions in the bank to like celebrate like you're a wealthy person. Yeah. Like I should walk that way now. The money's already on its way. You know what I'm saying? Like
it's a finding out. It's like it does feel, and I go back and forth all the time on the topic of like free will because like it does like I want to believe that, but it also does seem like so many things. Like I have, and I'll show you after, I have some poems that I wrote when I was in 7th grade that is like essentially what I'm doing now.
It's fire.
And it's like and it's one of those things where it's like it's scary almost. Like how do you this is like literally just a personal advice question because I need it, but like it's almost scary when you manifest something or when you write it down and it comes to fruition.
Yes,
and it's almost like to feel that level of power or control, or like, because we're all like, for me, it's like a control thing. Like you're out of control, you desperate for control, and then it's like, but you want to like go of control, and it's
listen, it's only scary until it's not. Because look, for me, bro, like when I was in the warehouse, I dreamed of having $1 million creative facility where thousands of creators could come every day, be them, learn, grow, get paid lots of money to work with some of the biggest brands in the world. Now that's literally our reality.
Yeah.
But like, if I didn't have the confidence to like think it, first, if God didn't give me that vision, and then I didn't have the confidence to listen, do the journaling, write it out, hey team, this is what we can do, yada, yada, then it would have never happened, right? So some people are like, I have to know where we're going before we go. But I think some of the most successful people and the people that are faith driven is like, I don't need to see the end. I just need to see the next step in front of me, and I know where it's going to go because I'm going to co-create where it's going with God.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
It's funny. I'm laughing because like
that's how creation works.
I said that on the second episode we recorded. I said I'm deathly afraid of the success here.
Bro,
I'm not afraid of failure. What is failure? It hasn't started. Like, what is failure? I'm like, there's nothing. I don't, like, at that point, we hadn't even put anything out. So, like, I'm like, failure is where we're here. We're like, it's already, like, and I'm cool with that. I don't know. Failure there's no failure if you learn from it. There's no.
That's right, man. But yeah, most people are afraid of success, man.
Yeah.
And that's why they get in their own way. That's why they self-sabotage. Because success is scary, bro. Like, it's one thing to be a failure and never be successful, but to be successful and then fail, now you better be checking on them, right? Because that's a whole different thing. It's almost like if you're born blind, it's way better than if you got blinded 20 years old,
because you didn't have the perspective.
You know?
Yeah, it is. And that's again on the creator's journey. It's like these people who have one killer album and are never able to recreate it. And it's all about the people that are able to do it again and again and again and figure out the process.
And I think for me, that's the perspective challenge. They think that like the great creation was their art, but really, as a creator, you have to know that your greatest creation is you.
Yeah.
Right. Like me and Dave built Rec. Of course, like we grew through the process, but like he and I built Rec. Rec wasn't just purely responsible for creating us. So it's like, if we can create a Rec, we can go create another thing.
Yeah.
So it's like that fear of like not being able to outperform your thing is really just like.
And you can't take away, my opinion is you can't take away you.
No.
If you were, for whatever reason, kicked out of the business tomorrow, you exist.
I'm still going to be successful.
And you're going to do something else. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And you're just going to do it again.
And who knows if like I might be more successful at the next thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like Sam Altman got fired, bro. Like, and he's probably going to be back.
Yeah.
But like, I think he is back.
By the end of the conversation.
Right. He's back. But it's like, Sam shouldn't be scared.
Yeah.
Sam could go do anything tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's him. you know?
And everybody had that backing. I'm just fascinated. I'm fascinated by people in general. And then I am very fascinated on both sides of it. The people in the bottom 10% and the people in the top 10%, or even like top one, bottom one. It's like, what is, because there's similarities. There's those things. Like it's just finding it within you. Yeah. And I don't know. And again, like with Destiny, it's like, it does feel like that for me right now, but on my bad days, it's tough to convince me of that.
Whatever the science is, I think you should do the research of really excavating what are the similarities between people at the top 10% of society and at the bottom 10.
Yeah.
Because I think that they are so much more similar than we could ever imagine. And that's why, like, when you think about successful people, like, I personally don't know any uber successful people, especially not in my culture, who don't have crazy stories. Right? Like Oprah's story coming up, crazy.
Yeah.
Right? Like what she had to navigate and how she survived, like nuts. Like most people, again, who are crazy achievers, they have a wild, traumatic story. And one person just was able to kind of build that outlet in a positive manner. And one person probably just like let their story become bigger than them and they stayed there. I think that's really the only difference.
Yeah. If people's story, that's a good way to actually kind of wrap it up. It's like the story. This is your story, what you're creating, everything like that.
That's right.
And it's going to keep on developing.
And most creatives know, if they're fortunate, they get to a place where they realize that they are the ones creating their story.
Yeah. And it's, I can't wait. That's been one of my most exciting parts of this journey is like, I get to meet so many people at certain points of your life. Yeah. And like, you're about to open this up in Miami. You're about to move down there. We're gonna be looking back in 5 years, grabbing a drink. And it's like, yo, like what? Like, and again, all those things, when your kids are 18 and say, I'm going to ask you that question again. Like, that's like, what did they say? What did they end up saying? This is out there on the internet. It's gonna be there. Like, I hope they get to watch it someday. And well,
and look, man, I'll just say this, and I know we're wrapping it up, but it's like, even the fact that I said that to you a few moments ago increases the likelihood of it coming true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the fact that I said it means that like I have a vision for the kind of father I want to be. So because I have a vision for the kind of father I want to be, now I can actually work backwards and say, okay, well, what do I need to do to become that kind of person who has the balance of his life to be as present with his kids as he wants, right? And is in the word and living out the things that he's saying. So it's like a lot of people don't get a chance to be successful for whatever that looks like for them. It's because they don't first take the time to create the vision for themselves.
Yeah, it's like, just reminds me of Kobe. Just like the amount of times that he talked about visualizing things. And
you have to.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's in the word, bro. Like he says, where there is no vision, the people perish.
Damn.
You gotta see it before you can be it.
Yeah. Well, you're inspiring. You're inspiring just in general, but especially at this point again in my life and at this time, I I'm so grateful for you and for the fact that you took your time.
Thanks, brother,
to come and do this. So
listen, however I can be a resource, please let me know.
Yeah.
And I mean that.
Can we shout out, how can we be, I love this, I'm gonna steal from Nicole. She said at the end, she goes, how can we be of resource to you?
Word.
How can we, like, what, is there anything that we can do, anybody listening can do to support?
Absolutely, man. One is don't keep us and Rec a secret. You know what I'm saying? We have our space here in Philadelphia. Rec Miami comes next year. But if you are a creative and you like some of the things I was talking about, you can go to joinrec.com and be a part of all of the things. If you're not a creative, but you have someone in your life that you love that is a creative, go ahead and just buy them a membership. You know what I'm saying? And again, do that at joinrec.com. But yeah, man, just spread the word. You see us drop some fly merch, cop it, and support. Yeah, follow me on Instagram too.
Let's go.
I'll be saying cool stuff.
We'll link that. We'll link your book. Cool. And I hope, Max, if you're down, if we could come see the space.
Please come see the space.
And maybe do a little bit of filming and get something out when we're gonna release this, because
get some good B-roll.
Because what I've heard of it and what I've seen of it, because I've seen the studios, I've seen the videos. I mean, it's epic. So
it's fire.
Yeah. But dude, thank you so much. And yeah, let's go.
Good job.
I'll see you.